school janitor found a 9-year-old boy hiding in the bathroom until dark and asked why he was there. The note the boy slipped about his foster parents made the janitor call 911 immediately. The fluorescent lights of Oakwood Elementary buzzed overhead like tired insects, casting a sterile glow that did little to warm the empty corridors. Mark Hunter pushed his mop across the worn linoleum floor with practiced strokes, the rhythm as familiar to him as his own heartbeat. Outside, January darkness had already claimed the afternoon, and frost patterns spread across the windows like delicate ferns. At 53, Mark's body protested this work more than it had when he'd started 4 years ago. His back ached in the specific way that suggested his spine was keeping score of all the times he'd bent to pick up discarded lunch wrappers or scrubbed graffiti from bathroom walls. The custodian's uniform, G-Mark pants and a blue shirt with Oakwood Elementary, stitched above the pocket, hung looser on his frame than it once had. His wife, Maggie, before she'd left for her sister's place in Arizona, used to say he was disappearing a little each day. Maybe she was right. He passed classroom 118, his old room, and paused, as he always did. Through the small window in the door, he could see the ghosts of his teaching days. 30 desks arranged in neat rows, walls covered with colorful educational posters, and himself at the front, chalk in hand, explaining how sentences could capture entire worlds. But the reality behind the glass was just empty desks and walls stripped of all but the most utilitarian decorations. Budget cuts had claimed his position 5 years ago. Last hired, first fired. The principal had explained apologetically. Teaching had been his second career. One he'd found after 20 years of corporate consulting had hollowed him out. He'd taken the pay cut gladly, buoyed by the belief that helping shape young minds offered something his previous work never could. The irony wasn't lost on him that he still roamed these hallways, just with a mop instead of a lesson plan. Mark sighed and moved on, pushing his cleaning cart toward the boys' bathrooms at the end of the east wing. The wheels squeaked slightly. He'd been meaning to oil them for weeks now. The sound echoed in the empty hallway, a small rebellion against the pressing silence. The night janitorial shift at Oakwood Elementary ran from 4 p.m. to midnight. It was now just past 6:30, and Mark had already cleaned the cafeteria, the main entryway, and most of the classrooms on the first floor. The building should have been empty except for Mrs. Henderson, the elderly secretary who often stayed late catching up on paperwork, and occasionally Principal Warren if there was a budget crisis to manage. Mark propped open the bathroom door with his cart and flipped on the lights. The institutional green tiles reflected the fluorescent glow, making the space appear even more unwelcoming. He was about to reach for the disinfectant SP mark when he heard it, a small, almost imperceptible intake of breath. He froze. "Hello," Mark called, his voice bouncing off the tiled walls. "Someone in here?" Silence answered him, but Mark knew better. 25 years of parenting and 5 years of teaching had attuned his ears to the sounds children make when they're trying not to be discovered. "It's just me, Mr. Hunter the janitor," he said, keeping his voice gentle. "School's been out for hours now. You shouldn't be here." Another silence, then a single stifled sniff from the last stall. Mark approached slowly, his work boots squeaking against the floor. "I'm going to come over there. Okay? You're not in trouble. I just need to make sure you're all right." When he reached the stall, the door was closed but not latched. Through the narrow gap, he caught a glimpse of small sneakers, blue with white laces, one of which had come undone. He knocked lightly on the door. "Can you come out, please?" After a moment's hesitation, the door swung inward slowly. A boy of about 9 stood there, his sandy brown hair falling across his forehead, partially obscuring eyes that seemed too old for his face. Mark recognized him immediately. Noah Parker, a 4th grader who had started at Oakwood 3 months ago. The boy was thin but not unhealthily so, dressed in clean, well-fitting clothes, jeans, a red sweater, and those blue sneakers. Nothing about his appearance suggested neglect, yet something in his posture, the way he seemed to fold in on himself, struck Mark as familiar and concerning. "Noah, right?" Mark asked, crouching down despite the protest from his knees. At eye level with the boy, He could see the redness around Noah's eyes and the dried tear tracks on his cheeks. "What are you doing here so late? Everyone's gone home." Noah looked at the floor, his fingers working anxiously at the hem of his sweater. "I missed the bus," he mumbled. Mark checked his watch. "School let out almost 3 hours ago. The late bus left at 4. "Did you tell anyone you were still here?" The boy shook his head. "Your parents must be worried sick." Mark reached for his cell phone. "We should call them right away." At this, Noah's head snapped up, his eyes wide with something that looked alarmingly like fear. "No, please don't." Then, seeming to realize his outburst, he added more quietly, "They're not. They're my foster parents, and they're at some dinner thing tonight. They won't be checking for me until late." Mark studied the boy's face carefully. In his years of teaching, he'd encountered various situations with foster children. Some positive, others heartbreakingly difficult. Noah had been placed with the Caldwells, if he remembered correctly. Gregory and Diane Caldwell lived in one of the newer developments on the north side of town. Gregory worked in finance, and Diane was involved in various community organizations. They appeared, from the outside, to be ideal foster parents. "Even so," Mark said gently, "someone needs to know where you are. It's not safe for you to be alone in the school building." Noah's eyes darted around the bathroom as if looking for escape routes. "I was just waiting until it got dark," he said. "Then I was going to leave." "And go where?" Mark asked, his concern deepening. The boy shrugged, a gesture so deliberate in its casualness that it could only be hiding something significant. "Noah," Mark said, using the voice he once reserved for classroom discussions about difficult topics, "why are you really hiding in here?" Noah's lower lip trembled slightly before he bit down on it. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a folded piece of paper. After a moment's hesitation, he thrust it toward Mark. "I wrote it down," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "Because sometimes when I try to say things, the words get all jumbled up, and then people don't believe me." Mark took the paper, unfolding it carefully. The handwriting was neat but small, as if Noah had been trying to compress his thoughts into the most minimal space possible. As Mark read, the fluorescent lights seemed to dim around him. The buzzing faded to background noise, and the world narrowed to just this moment, just these words, just this boy standing before him with resignation and hope warring in his eyes. "Dear anyone, my name is Noah Parker. I am 9 years old. I live with the Caldwells. They are my third foster home. When people come to visit, they act nice. They show them my room with the blue walls and the bookshelf. But most nights I have to stay in the basement room. It has no windows. If I make noise, they take away food. Last week I didn't eat for 2 days because I dropped a glass. Mr. Caldwell gets very angry. He doesn't hit me where people can see. Mrs. Caldwell just watches. She says I'm ungrateful. Nobody believes foster kids. My social worker only comes when they know about it. They hide things. They hide me sometimes. Please help me, but don't tell them I told. They'll say I'm lying. They always say that about kids. Noah P. Mark read the note twice, his hands growing cold despite the overheated building. He looked up at Noah, who was watching him intently, gauging his reaction with the careful observation of a child who had learned that adult responses could determine his safety. "Noah," Mark said, struggling to keep his voice steady. "How long has this been happening?" "Since after Christmas," Noah said. "They were nice at first. But then Mr. Caldwell said I wasn't adjusting properly, because I still asked about my mom sometimes." Mark carefully folded the note and placed it in his shirt pocket. "And your mom is?" "In jail," Noah said matter-of-factly. "For drugs. But she's not a bad person. She just got sick, that's what my grandma used to say. But then Grandma died, and there wasn't anyone else, so—" He trailed off, the rest of the story clear enough. Mark's mind raced through possibilities, none of them simple. The protocol was straightforward. Report suspected abuse to child services immediately. But Mark had seen how overburdened the system was, how reports could take days or weeks to investigate, especially when the accused were respected community members like the Caldwells. "When do they expect you home?" Mark asked. Noah glanced at the large clock on the bathroom wall. The thing there it goes until 9, I think. Usually, I'd be doing homework in my room until they get home. Mark made a decision then, one that bypassed every official procedure he knew should be followed. Here's what we're going to do, he said. I'm going to call 911, Noah. This needs to be reported right away. Noah's face crumpled. They won't believe me. Nobody ever does. They'll just send me back. And then it'll be worse. I believe you, Mark said firmly. And I'm going to make sure the police do too. But we need to do this properly through official channels, okay? I'll stay with you the whole time. The boy looked unconvinced but nodded slightly. Mark pulled out his cell phone, his hand hovering over the keypad. 20 years ago, he'd faced another moment like this. His son, Michael, barely 16, showing signs of depression that Mark and Maggie had attributed to typical teenage moodiness. They'd waited too long to act, convinced they could handle it within the family. The memory of finding Michael's empty pill bottles still visited Mark in his darkest dreams. He wouldn't make the same mistake twice. Mark dialed 911, his eyes never leaving Noah's face. When the dispatcher answered, he spoke clearly and concisely. I need to report a case of child abuse, he said. I'm at Oakwood Elementary School with a 9-year-old boy who's shown me evidence of serious abuse and neglect by his foster parents. As he spoke, giving details and answering questions, Noah's shoulders gradually relaxed, as if simply hearing an adult take his claims seriously had lifted some invisible weight. They'll be here soon, Mark said after ending the call. Let's wait in the front office where it's more comfortable. Noah hesitated. What's going to happen to me? It was the question Mark had been dreading, the one to which he had no good answer. I don't know exactly, he admitted, but I promise you won't have to go back to the Caldwells tonight. And I'm going to do everything I can to make sure you're safe from now on. As they walked through the silent corridors, Noah's footsteps quick and light beside Mark's measured tread. Mark felt something stir within him that had been dormant for years. Not just purpose, though that was part of it, but something more fundamental, the recognition that sometimes paths cross exactly when they need to, that sometimes the shadows we cast reach just far enough to shelter someone else from harm. Noah's small hand slipped into his as they approached the office, a gesture of trust that felt both fragile and monumental. Mr. Hunter? Noah asked. Yes. Thank you for believing me. Mark squeezed the boy's hand gently. Always. Outside, the winter night pressed against the windows, but inside, for the first time in years, Mark felt the faintest warmth of spring. The school's front office was designed to be welcoming, with its soft beige walls and motivational posters featuring diverse children reaching for stars. But at night, with only the security lights casting long shadows across the reception area, it felt more like a waiting room for uncertain fates. Mark had found Mrs. Henderson's electric kettle and made Noah hot chocolate, which the boy held between his palms more for warmth than consumption. Police should be here soon, Mark said, settling into one of the vinyl chairs beside Noah. The chair, designed for elementary school visitors, was uncomfortably small for his frame. You doing okay? Noah nodded, his eyes fixed on the swirling chocolate in his mug. What about your cleaning? He asked suddenly. Won't you get in trouble if you don't finish? The question caught Mark off guard, that in the midst of his own crisis, the boy would worry about Mark's job responsibilities. It spoke volumes about what Noah had been conditioned to prioritize. Some things are more important than clean floors, Mark said gently. Don't worry about that. Noah seemed to consider this concept carefully, as if it represented an entirely new way of ordering the world. Can I ask you something, Mr. Hunter? Of course. How come you're the janitor now? Joey Malinsky said you used to be a teacher. Mark smiled slightly. Joey's right. I taught 5th grade English for 5 years. Before that, I worked in an office for a long time. Did you get fired for doing something bad? The question was asked with such innocent directness that Mark couldn't help but chuckle. No, nothing like that. The school had to cut positions because they didn't have enough money. Since I'd been teaching for the shortest time, I was let go. Noah frowned. That doesn't seem fair. Life rarely is, Mark said, then regretted his bitterness when he saw Noah's expression fall. But sometimes, he amended, it gives you exactly what you need when you least expect it. Before Noah could respond, the office door opened. Principal Warren entered, her normally immaculate appearance slightly disheveled, as if she'd rushed from somewhere important. Behind her came two police officers, a tall man with salt and pepper hair and a younger woman with her dark hair pulled back in a tight bun. "Mark," Principal Warren acknowledged with a nod before turning her attention to Noah. "Hello, Noah. I'm sorry you're having a difficult evening." The boy shrank back slightly in his chair, his fingers tightening around the mug. Mark instinctively moved closer, providing a buffer between Noah and the newcomers. "I'm Officer Luis Mendez," the male officer said, crouching down to Noah's eye level. His voice was gentle but firm. "And this is my partner, Officer Reyes. We're here because Mr. Hunter called us about some concerns." "Olivia," the female officer corrected with a small smile. "You can call me Olivia, Noah. We just want to talk a little. Okay?" Noah looked at Mark, who nodded encouragingly. "Can Mr. Hunter stay?" Noah asked, his voice barely audible. Officer Reyes glanced at her partner. "Of course," she said. "But we might need to ask him to step out for a few minutes later so we can talk to you alone. Is that okay?" Noah hesitated, then nodded. Principal Warren cleared her throat. "Perhaps my office would be more appropriate for this discussion," she suggested, gesturing down the hallway. As they moved toward her office, Mark noticed Noah's breathing had quickened. He placed a reassuring hand on the boy's shoulder. "I'll be right there with you," he murmured. Principal Warren's office was a stark contrast to the sparse front reception. Here were family photos, potted plants, and shelves lined with educational texts and awards. She motioned for Noah to sit in one of the plush chairs facing her desk, but the boy remained standing until Mark took a seat and patted the chair beside him. "Now," Officer Mendez began once they were all settled, "Mr. Hunter told the dispatcher that you gave him a note, Noah. Can we see that note?" Mark reached into his pocket and withdrew the folded paper, handing it to Officer Mendez. A heavy silence filled the room as both officers read it. "Noah," Officer Reyes said after a moment, her voice professionally neutral, "can you tell us more about this basement room?" The boy stared at his hands. "It's small," he said finally. "There's a mattress on the floor and a bucket in the corner if I need to. You know." He glanced up briefly, his cheeks flushed with embarrassment. "The door locks from the outside. There's no light switch inside." Mark felt something cold settle in his stomach. He'd known from the note that things were bad, but hearing Noah describe the room made the reality of it more visceral. "How long do they leave you in there?" Officer Reyes asked. "It depends," Noah said. "Sometimes just a night. Last weekend it was from Friday after school until Sunday morning because I asked when I could visit my mom." Principal Warren made a small sound of distress but quickly composed herself. Officer Mendez continued taking notes, his expression carefully controlled. "And you mentioned not eating for 2 days," Officer Reyes said. "Can you tell us more about that?" Noah's fingers worked anxiously at a loose thread on his sweater. "Mrs. Caldwell says food is a privilege, not a right. If I make mistakes or ask too many questions, I don't get dinner. Sometimes breakfast too." "What about at school?" Principal Warren interjected. "You've been eating lunch here, haven't you?" Noah nodded. "Most days, but sometimes they pack lunches that look really nice from the outside, with notes and everything, but inside there's just a slice of bread or something." The calculated nature of this deception, packing sham lunches that would appear normal to teachers and cafeteria staff, sent a chill through Mark. These weren't impulsive acts of frustration. This was systematic abuse designed to remain hidden. "Noah," Officer Mendez said, "you wrote that Mr. Caldwell hurts you but not where people can see. Can you explain what you mean?" At this, Noah's composure finally cracked. His lower lip trembled, and tears welled in his eyes. "He uses his belt sometimes," he whispered. "On my back or here." He gestured vaguely to his upper thighs. "And he twists my arms behind my back if I don't move fast enough." Mark fought to maintain his own composure. He'd suspected physical abuse from the note, but hearing the details made him want to find Gregory Caldwell immediately. Officer Reyes leaned forward. Noah, would you be willing to let a doctor check you? They could document any injuries, which would help us make sure you don't have to go back to the Caldwells. Noah looked panicked. Right now. It would be best, Officer Mendez confirmed. We'll need to take some photographs too, but a female officer will be present the whole time, and you can have Mr. Hunter wait nearby if you'd like. Noah looked at Mark, his expression so vulnerable that Mark felt his heart constrict. Will you come? The boy asked. Of course, Mark said without hesitation. I'll be there as long as you need me. Officer Reyes stood. We should get going then. I'll call ahead to the hospital. Principal Warren, we'll need the contact information for Noah's social worker and his file. As Principal Warren moved to her computer, Mark noticed Noah had begun to tremble slightly. What if they come to the school looking for me? He asked, his voice tight with fear. The Caldwells, Officer Mendez clarified. Noah nodded. They won't find you, Officer Reyes assured him. We're going to make sure you're safe. But the boy didn't look convinced. Mark could see the scenario playing out in his mind. The Caldwells arriving at the school, presenting their concerned foster parent facade, perhaps even being allowed to take Noah home where the consequences would be unimaginable. Noah, Mark said quietly, the police won't let that happen, and neither will I. Promise. The word was small, fragile. I promise, Mark replied, with a certainty he hadn't felt about anything in years. Boston Medical Center's Pediatric Emergency Department was quieter than Mark had expected for a Thursday evening. A nurse led them to a private examination room, its walls painted with cheerful underwater scenes that felt jarringly at odds with their purpose for being there. A doctor from our child protection team will be in shortly, the nurse explained, handing Noah a hospital gown. Can you change into this, sweetheart? You can leave your underwear on. As the nurse left, Noah stared at the gown, making no move to change. Mark sensed his discomfort. Would you like me to step out? Mark asked. Noah nodded, his eyes fixed on the floor. I'll be right outside the door, Mark assured him. Just call when you're ready. In the hallway, Mark found Officer Reyes speaking quietly into her phone. She ended the call as he approached. We've contacted Noah's social worker, Jessica Lynn, she informed him. She's on her way. We've also sent officers to the Caldwell residence, but according to neighbors, they haven't returned home yet. Mark nodded, processing this information. What happens next? For Noah, Officer Reyes sighed, and for a moment her professional demeanor slipped, revealing the weight of cases like these. Best case scenario? The doctor documents evidence of abuse, we arrest the Caldwells, and Noah's social worker finds him an emergency placement tonight while the investigation proceeds. And worst case, the physical evidence is inconclusive, the Caldwells deny everything, and the system moves at its typical glacial pace while Noah remains in an unstable situation. Her honesty was refreshing, if disheartening. How likely is the worst case? Mark asked. With the note, Noah's testimony, and any physical evidence we find, I'd say the chances of him returning to the Caldwells tonight are very low. But I've been surprised before, and not in good ways. Mr. Hunter? Noah's small voice called from inside the room. I'm done. Mark re-entered to find Noah perched on the edge of the examination table, the gown making him look even smaller than he was. The boy's clothes were neatly folded on a chair, his blue sneakers placed carefully underneath. You okay? Mark asked. Noah shrugged. I don't like doctors much. Me neither, Mark confided. But this one is going to help make sure you're safe. As if on cue, there was a knock and a woman entered. She appeared to be in her late 40s, with cropped silver hair and kind eyes behind stylish glasses. Hello, Noah. I'm Dr. Patel, she said, extending her hand first to Noah, then to Mark. And you must be Mr. Hunter. Officer Reyes filled me in. Noah shook her hand tentatively. Dr. Patel pulled up a rolling stool and sat, bringing herself to eye level with the boy. I know this is scary, she said directly, but I'm going to do my best to make it as comfortable as possible. I need to examine you to document any injuries you might have. Would it be all right if Mr. Hunter waited outside during the physical part of the exam? Noah glanced at Mark, who gave him an encouraging nod. I guess so, Noah agreed reluctantly. I'll be right outside, Mark assured him again, squeezing the boy's shoulder gently before leaving. In the hallway, Mark found himself pacing. The fluorescent lights and antiseptic smell brought back unwelcome memories of another hospital. Another night. The worst of his life. He forced himself to sit on a nearby bench, focusing on his breathing. It was nearly an hour before Dr. Patel emerged, her expression grave. She motioned Mark a few steps away from the door. Noah has significant bruising on his back and upper thighs, she said without preamble, consistent with being struck with a belt. There are also older bruises in various stages of healing. He's underweight for his height and age, and there are signs of mild malnutrition. Mark's jaw tightened. Will it be enough to keep him away from them? More than enough, Dr. Patel confirmed. I've already called Child Protective Services directly, in addition to filing my report with the police. There's no way Noah should return to that home. The relief Mark felt was immediate but short-lived as another woman approached them. Young, professionally dressed, with a harried expression that suggested too many cases and too little time. Jessica Lynn, she introduced herself briskly. Noah's social worker. I understand you're the one who found him. This was directed at Mark. Yes, he confirmed. Mark Hunter. I'm the night janitor at Oakwood. If she found his occupation relevant, she didn't show it. And you're the one he gave the note to? Mark nodded. I'd like to see it, please. Officer Reyes, who had rejoined them, handed over a photocopy of Noah's note. Jessica read it quickly, her professional facade cracking slightly. God, she muttered. I just placed him with the Caldwells 3 months ago. They passed all the background checks, home visits. They seemed ideal. People like that often do, Dr. Patel said, a hint of bitterness in her tone. Jessica sighed, rubbing her forehead. I need to see him now and explain what's going to happen next. Which is what, exactly? Mark asked. Emergency foster placement tonight, Jessica said. I have a couple who takes these cases, the Williamses. They're experienced with traumatized children. Then tomorrow we'll start looking for a more permanent solution. Mark felt a sudden, inexplicable reluctance to let Noah go with yet another stranger to yet another unfamiliar home. Could I? He began, then stopped himself. What was he thinking? That he could take Noah himself? He had no certification, no preparation, nothing to offer except an instinctive concern that surprised even him. Jessica gave him a knowing look. It's better this way, Mr. Hunter. The Williamses know how to handle these situations. She moved toward Noah's room, followed by Officer Reyes. Dr. Patel touched Mark's arm gently. You did the right thing, she said. That boy might have endured months more abuse if you hadn't found him today. Mark nodded, but the knot in his stomach remained. He followed them back into the examination room where Noah, now dressed in his own clothes again, looked up with apprehensive eyes. Noah, Jessica began, her voice gentling. I'm Miss Lynn, your social worker. Do you remember me? The boy nodded cautiously. I'm so sorry about what happened at the Caldwells, she continued. You're not going back there, okay? We're going to find you a different foster home. Tonight? Noah asked, his voice small. Yes, I know a very nice couple who will take good care of you until we can figure out a longer-term plan. Noah's eyes darted to Mark, panic evident. But the Williamses are very experienced, Jessica continued. They've helped lots of kids in situations like yours. I don't want to go with strangers, Noah said, his voice rising slightly. I want to stay with Mr. Hunter. The room fell silent. Mark felt everyone's eyes turn to him. Noah, he said gently. Miss Lynn is right. The Williamses know how to help kids who've been through tough times. I'm just a janitor with a small apartment. But you believed me, Noah insisted. Nobody else ever did. The simple truth of the statement hung in the air, indicting an entire system of adults who had failed to see what was happening to this child. I know you're scared, Jessica said, but this is how the process works. We need to follow the proper procedures. Mark saw Noah's shoulders slump in defeat, a child too accustomed to having no say in his own life. Could I have a moment with Noah? Mark asked suddenly. Just a minute or two? Jessica hesitated, then nodded. We'll be right outside. When they were alone, Mark sat beside Noah on the examination table. I know this is hard, he began. They won't let me see you again, will they? Noah interrupted, tears welling in his eyes. The question caught Mark off guard. I don't know. That's what always happens. People help for a little while, and then they disappear. Mark recognized the resignation in Noah's voice. It was the same tone that had crept into his own after Michael's death, when the world had seemed determined to prove that nothing good could last. Listen to me, Mark said firmly. I'm not disappearing. I'll talk to Miss Lynn about visiting you, and I'll be at school every day if you need me. You promise? Noah asked, echoing his earlier question, but this time with even more at stake. Mark took a deep breath. I promise, and I'm going to give you my phone number. If you ever need me, day or night, you call. Okay? He scribbled his number on a hospital notepad and pressed it into Noah's hand. The boy folded it carefully and tucked it into his pocket. They're going to ask you a lot of questions in the coming days, Mark continued. About the Caldwells, about what happened. Just tell the truth, like you did with me. Noah nodded solemnly. And remember, Mark added, what happened wasn't your fault. None of it. A tear slipped down Noah's cheek. I miss my mom, he whispered. Mark felt his own eyes sting. I know, buddy. I know. There was a gentle knock, and Jessica reappeared. Time to go, Noah. Mark stood, giving Noah's shoulder a final squeeze. Remember what I said. I'll see you soon. As Jessica led Noah away, the boy looked back once, his expression a mixture of hope and doubt that made Mark's heart ache. He watched until they disappeared around a corner, leaving him alone in the examination room with its cheerful underwater scenes that now seemed like a cruel joke about a world where children could swim freely, without fear. Mark's apartment was on the third floor of a converted Victorian in Dorchester. Once grand, the building now showed its age in water stains on the ceiling and windows that never quite closed properly. His one-bedroom unit was sparse. A couch, a coffee table, bookshelves filled with paperbacks, and a small dining table that doubled as a desk. The walls were a rental unit beige that he'd never bothered to paint, though he'd been living there for 4 years. It was nearly 2 a.m. when he finally unlocked his door, exhaustion weighing on him like a physical presence. After leaving the hospital, he'd returned to Oakwood to finish his cleaning duties, unable to face the thought of leaving the job incomplete despite Principal Warren's assurance that it would be fine. He tossed his keys onto the coffee table and sank onto the couch, not bothering to turn on more than the small lamp in the corner. The events of the evening replayed in his mind, particularly Noah's face as he was led away by his social worker. Mark's phone buzzed with a text message. It was from Maggie, just checking in. You up for dinner this weekend? Emma asked about you. Emma, their daughter, now 28 and living in New York with her husband. Unlike Mark, Maggie had managed to maintain a close relationship with her. Mark typed a response. Something came up at work. Can we postpone? We'll explain later. Maggie's reply came quickly. Everything okay? Mark stared at the screen. Was everything okay? Far from it, but not in ways he could easily explain via text. I'm fine. Just tired. We'll call tomorrow. He set the phone down and moved to the kitchen, opening the refrigerator more out of habit than hunger. The sparse contents, a half-gallon of milk, some leftover Chinese takeout, a few beers, reminded him of how little attention he paid to his own well-being these days. Mark closed the refrigerator and instead went to the window that overlooked the street. A light snow had begun to fall, dusting the parked cars and empty sidewalks. Somewhere across town, Noah was meeting the Williamses, trying to determine if these new strangers were safe or just better at hiding their cruelty. The thought propelled Mark to his laptop. He opened the browser and typed, "How to become a foster parent, Massachusetts." The search returned dozens of results, agencies, requirements, testimonials. Mark clicked on the official state website and began reading. The process was lengthy. Background checks, home studies, training sessions, references. It would take months, and there was no guarantee he would be approved. A single man in his 50s with a modest income and a small apartment wasn't exactly the ideal candidate. And yet, something about Noah had awakened a part of Mark he'd thought long dead. The part that believed he still had something worthwhile to offer the world. Before he could overthink it, Mark clicked on the Request Information button and began filling out the form. He paused at the question about his motivation for becoming a foster parent. What could he write that wouldn't sound either trite or self-serving? Finally, he typed, "I found a child hiding in a school bathroom today. He reminded me that sometimes we find purpose in unexpected places. I want to be there for kids who need someone to believe them." Mark hit submit, then closed his laptop. He didn't know if anything would come of it, but for the first time in years, he'd taken a step toward something rather than away from it. Outside, the snow continued to fall, covering the city in a temporary innocence that would be gone by morning. But for now, in this quiet moment, Mark allowed himself to imagine a different future than the one he'd resigned himself to, one where the shadows of the past didn't determine the shape of what was to come. 3 days after finding Noah in the school bathroom, Mark sat in an interview room at the Boston Police Department's District C11 station. The walls were an institutional G-mark, the table scratched from years of nervous fingers and handcuffs. A clock above the door ticked loudly, marking time in a way that made each minute feel deliberate. Detective Olivia Reyes entered, carrying a manila folder and 2 coffee cups. She placed one in front of Mark. "3 sugars, right? I remembered from yesterday." Mark nodded, grateful for the small kindness. This was his second interview. The first had been a basic statement taking, but Detective Reyes had called that morning requesting a more detailed follow-up. "How's Noah?" Mark asked as she settled into the chair across from him. "Physically, he's doing okay. The Williamses report he's eating well but having trouble sleeping. Nightmares." She opened the folder, revealing photographs that made Mark's stomach clench. Noah's back and thighs, marked with welts and bruises in various stages of healing. These were taken at the hospital. The older bruises suggest this has been going on for weeks, not days. Mark pushed the photos away, unable to look at them any longer. "Have they arrested the Caldwells?" "Gregory and Diane Caldwell were taken into custody last night," Reyes confirmed. "They're claiming Noah self-harmed and fabricated the abuse allegations because he wants to return to his mother." "That's ridiculous," Mark said, anger rising in his throat. "You saw his reaction to them. A child doesn't invent a detailed account of being locked in a basement room." "I agree," Reyes said, "but they've hired Martin Cohen as their attorney." The name was familiar to Mark. Cohen was a prominent defense lawyer whose face appeared on billboards throughout the city. He's already painting a picture of Noah as a troubled child with a history of behavioral issues, placed with the charitable Caldwells who were doing their best in a difficult situation. The contempt in her voice was evident despite her professional demeanor. "And people will believe that?" "Some will. The Caldwells are well connected. Gregory's firm manages investments for half the city council. Diane chairs 3 charity boards." Mark had suspected as much from the moment he read Noah's note. People like the Caldwells thrived because their social standing created a presumption of goodness that could be difficult to overcome. "That's why I asked you back," Reyes continued. "We need to build the strongest possible case. I want to go through everything again in detail. Any interactions you observed between Noah and the Caldwells, any changes in his behavior at school, anything he might have mentioned to you before that night." Mark nodded, prepared to spend as long as necessary ensuring the Caldwells faced consequences. "Whatever you need." Reyes activated a recording device and began her questions. For the next 2 hours, Mark recounted every detail he could remember. Noah's increasing withdrawal over the weeks preceding the incident, the few times he'd seen Gregory Caldwell at school functions, always impeccably dressed and outwardly attentive, the careful way Noah had hidden the note until he was certain Mark would take him seriously. "There's something else," Mark said as the interview seemed to be winding down. "I requested information about becoming a foster parent." Reyes looked up from her notes, surprise evident in her expression. For Noah specifically? I don't know if that's even possible, Mark admitted. But yes, I've been thinking about it. She studied him for a moment. That's a significant commitment, Mr. Hunter, especially for a child with Noah's background. I understand that. Mark met her gaze steadily. But I made him a promise that I wouldn't disappear from his life. I intend to keep it. Reyes nodded slowly. For what it's worth, I think you'd be good for him. You already have his trust, which is no small thing. She closed her folder. But the system doesn't always prioritize what's best for the child. It prioritizes protocols. I'm learning that, Mark said. As he stood to leave, Reyes handed him a business card. My direct line, she explained, in case you think of anything else, or if you need help navigating the foster care bureaucracy. Mark pocketed the card, touched by the unexpected support. Thank you. One more thing, Reyes added as he reached the door. Noah asked about you yesterday. Wanted to know if you were coming to visit. The Williamses said you'd be welcome anytime. Something warm unfurled in Mark's chest at the knowledge that Noah had asked for him. I'll go this evening, if that's all right. I think it would do him good, Reyes said. He needs to know that not all adults will let him down. The Williamses lived in a modest colonial in Jamaica Plain. Its blue paint faded, but its garden meticulously maintained even in winter. Martha Williams, a robust woman in her 60s with silver hair and laugh lines around her eyes, welcomed Mark at the door. You must be Mr. Hunter, she said warmly. I'm Martha. Please, come in out of the cold. The house smelled of cinnamon and something savory baking. It was cluttered but clean, with mismatched furniture that spoke of comfort rather than style. Noah's been asking when you'd visit, Martha said, leading Mark through a hallway lined with photographs. Many showing children of various ages, some with the Williamses, others in graduation gowns or sports uniforms. We've been fostering for 30 years now. Most of these kids still keep in touch. They entered a kitchen where a tall, thin man with a neatly trimmed beard was helping Noah with what appeared to be math homework at the table. Mark, this is my husband, Thomas. And of course, you know Noah. Noah looked up at the sound of Mark's name, his face breaking into the first genuine smile Mark had seen from him. Mr. Hunter, you came. I promised, didn't I? Mark said, surprised when Noah abandoned his homework to give him a quick, fierce hug. Thomas Williams shook Mark's hand. Noah's told us how you helped him. We're grateful. Anyone would have done the same, Mark said automatically. No, Thomas replied, his expression serious. They wouldn't have. Trust me, we've seen enough to know that many people choose to look the other way. Martha gestured for Mark to sit at the table. Can I get you some tea? Or coffee? I've just made cinnamon rolls too. Coffee would be great, thank you. Noah returned to his chair but kept glancing at Mark as if to reassure himself that he was really there. How are you doing, Noah? Mark asked gently. The boy shrugged. Okay, I guess. The police asked me a lot of questions yesterday. That must have been hard. Noah nodded. They showed me pictures of the basement room. They went to the Caldwell's house and took pictures of everything. Mark exchanged a glance with Thomas, concerned about how much Noah knew about the investigation. Detective Reyes was nice though, Noah continued. She didn't make me feel like I was making things up. Martha placed a mug of coffee in front of Mark and a glass of milk for Noah. Noah's been very brave, she said, resting a gentle hand on the boy's shoulder. But we're taking it one day at a time. Miss Lynn said I'll have to testify, Noah said suddenly, his voice small. At a trial. She said the Caldwells are saying I'm lying. Mark felt a surge of anger at the thought of Noah being subjected to cross-examination by someone like Martin Cohen. Whatever happens, he said firmly, there are a lot of adults who believe you and who are going to make sure you're safe. Noah seemed to consider this. But what if they don't go to jail? What if I have to go back? That's not going to happen, Thomas assured him. There's too much evidence against them. But Mark saw the doubt in Noah's eyes, the ingrained belief that the system would ultimately fail him as it had before. Noah, Mark said, leaning forward. Do you remember what I told you at the hospital? About calling me if you ever needed anything? The boy nodded. That still stands. No matter what happens with the trial or anything else, you can always reach out to me. I'm not going anywhere. Some of the tension eased from Noah's shoulders. Okay. Martha touched Thomas's arm. Why don't we give Mark and Noah some time to talk? I need your help with something upstairs. As they left, Mark noticed the subtle way they kept the kitchen door ajar, close enough to monitor but far enough to provide a sense of privacy. It was the practiced move of experienced foster parents who understood the balance between supervision and trust. They're nice, Noah said once they were alone. They don't get mad if I ask for more food or if I have bad dreams. I'm glad, Mark said. It seems like a good home. Noah traced a pattern on the table with his finger. It's just temporary, though. Miss Lynn said they'll find me a permanent placement after the trial. And how do you feel about that? I don't know. He continued his tracing, not meeting Mark's eyes. I wish I could just go back to my mom. Mark had wondered about Noah's mother but hadn't wanted to pry. Have you been able to talk to her? Noah shook his head. Miss Lynn said she's trying to arrange a phone call, but it's complicated. Mom's in MCI Framingham. That's a women's prison, he added, with the matter-of-factness of a child who'd had to learn too much about adult institutions too soon. Do you know how much longer she'll be there? 1 more year, maybe. She got caught with drugs again after she was already on probation. But she was trying to get better. She went to rehab twice. There was a fierce loyalty in Noah's voice that tugged at Mark's heart. Despite everything, the boy still believed in his mother's goodness, still wanted to return to her. Miss Lynn said Mom's doing a program in prison, Noah continued. If she finishes it, she might get to come home sooner. That sounds promising, Mark said, careful not to offer false hope. Yeah. Noah's finger stopped its tracing. Mr. Hunter, can I ask you something? Of course. Do you have kids? The question landed like a physical blow, unexpected despite its innocence. Mark took a careful breath. I had 2, a son and a daughter. Noah caught the past tense immediately. Had. My daughter, Emma, lives in New York. She's grown up now, married. Mark paused, steeling himself for the next part. My son, Michael, died 5 years ago. He was 16. Noah's eyes widened. I'm sorry, he said, with the simple empathy of a child who understood loss. What happened to him? Mark rarely spoke about Michael, even with Maggie. The shared grief had become a void between them, growing wider with each passing year until finally, she'd left for Arizona, unable to bear the silence anymore. He overdosed, Mark said after a long moment, on prescription pills. He'd been struggling with depression, but we didn't realize how serious it was until it was too late. Noah absorbed this information with a gravity beyond his years. Was it an accident? The question hit at the core of what had tormented Mark for years. I don't know, he admitted. The police ruled it accidental, but I've always wondered if he meant to do it, if I missed the signs. My mom's friend overdosed once, Noah said, but the paramedics came and saved her with that special medicine. Narcan, I think it's called. We found Michael too late for that, Mark said softly. I was at work. Maggie, my wife, was at the grocery store. By the time she got home, he trailed off, unwilling to burden Noah with the details. Is that why you're not a teacher anymore? Because of Michael? Mark was struck by the child's perceptiveness. Partly. After he died, I couldn't focus on teaching. I made mistakes, fell behind. When the budget cuts came, I was an easy one to let go. And your wife left too? Noah's directness was both painful and oddly refreshing. We couldn't help each other through the grief, Mark explained. Sometimes pain drives people apart instead of bringing them together. Noah nodded as if this made perfect sense to him. My mom changed after my dad left. She was sad all the time. That's when she started using drugs. For a moment, they sat in silence. 2 people who understood loss finding unexpected common ground despite the decades between them. Mr. Hunter? Noah's voice was tentative now. Yes. I think Michael probably didn't mean to do it. The dying part, I mean, he fidgeted with his milk glass. My mom said sometimes people just want the pain to stop for a little while. They don't always mean to make it stop forever. Mark felt something crack open inside him. A fissure in the shell of guilt he'd built around his heart. From the mouth of this child came a perspective he'd needed but never allowed himself. That Michael's death could have been a miscalculation rather than an intention. "Thank you, Noah," he said, his voice rough with emotion. I think you might be right." Noah smiled tentatively, pleased to have offered something meaningful. "Mr. Hunter?" "Yes. Do you think maybe you could come visit again? Maybe bring a book next time?" Martha said they don't have many chapter books here. "I'd like that very much," Mark said, grateful for the change of subject. "Any particular kind of book you enjoy?" "Adventure stories," Noah said immediately. "Or mysteries. Nothing scary, though. I think I can manage that. How about this weekend?" Noah's face lit up. "Really? You'll come back that soon? I promised I wouldn't disappear, remember?" The boy nodded, looking more relaxed than he had since Mark arrived. "I remember." The Boston Herald headline caught Mark's eye as he paid for his coffee the next morning. "Prominent couple accused of foster child abuse. He's troubled," says attorney. Below was a photograph of Gregory and Diane Caldwell leaving the courthouse, both impeccably dressed, their expressions appropriately somber. Gregory had his arm protectively around his wife's shoulders. A perfect portrait of a wrongfully accused couple facing adversity with dignity. Mark bought the paper, reading the article as he walked to his car. The Caldwells had been released on bail pending trial. Their attorney, Martin Cohen, was quoted extensively. "My clients are devastated by these false accusations. They open their home to a troubled child from a broken family, with a history of behavioral issues, and this is how the system repays their charity. This boy has a documented history of fabricating stories to get attention." The article mentioned that the Caldwells had fostered several children over the past 5 years, positioning them as experienced and dedicated foster parents. There was a quote from a neighbor describing them as pillars of the community, and the last people you'd expect to harm a child. Noah wasn't named due to his age, but he was described as a 9-year-old boy whose mother is currently incarcerated for drug offenses. The implication was clear. A child from such a background couldn't be trusted, especially against the word of respected citizens like the Caldwells. Mark crumpled the paper and tossed it into a nearby trash can, his hands shaking with anger. The narrative was already being shaped, and it wasn't in Noah's favor. His phone rang as he reached his car. The display showed an unfamiliar number. "Mr. Hunter? This is Jessica Lynn, Noah's social worker." "Yes, hello?" Mark said, unlocking his car door. "Is everything okay with Noah?" "He's fine," she assured him quickly. "I'm calling because he's been asking about you. The Williamses mentioned you visited yesterday." "That's right. I'm planning to go again this weekend." There was a pause. "That's actually what I wanted to discuss. I appreciate your concern for Noah, but I need to make sure we're maintaining appropriate boundaries. It's important that he doesn't form attachments that might complicate his long-term placement." Mark felt a flare of irritation. "With all due respect, Ms. Lynn, I think Noah needs stability right now. He needs to know that not everyone is going to abandon him." "I understand that," she said, her tone professional but firm. "But the reality is that Noah will eventually be placed in a permanent foster home, possibly outside of Boston. Or, if his mother completes her rehabilitation program successfully, he may be reunited with her. I'm concerned that a continued close relationship with you might make those transitions more difficult. So you're saying I should just disappear from his life? After promising him I wouldn't. I'm saying we need to be careful about the expectations we're setting. Noah's been through significant trauma. He's vulnerable to forming intense attachments that can lead to more hurt when circumstances change." Mark took a deep breath, trying to modulate his anger. "I saw the newspaper this morning. The Caldwells are already spinning their story, making Noah out to be some kind of pathological liar. He needs people in his corner right now, not more adults walking away." There was silence on the other end of the line. When Jessica spoke again, her voice was slightly less clinical. "You really care about him, don't you?" Yes, Mark said simply. I do. Another pause. Look, I'm not saying you can't see him. Just maybe once a week instead of several times. And let's be thoughtful about the relationship. Noah's going to need a lot of support through the trial process. If you're serious about being there for him, it can't just be for a few weeks until the excitement dies down. I'm not going anywhere, Mark assured her. And I've already started the application process to become a foster parent. This seemed to take her by surprise. You have? That's a significant commitment. I'm aware. Would you be applying specifically to foster Noah? If that's a possibility, yes. Jessica sighed. It's complicated. There would be a lot of factors to consider: your living situation, your work schedule, your experience with children, particularly traumatized ones. And Noah's mother still has parental rights. She's indicated she wants to work toward reunification. I understand, Mark said. I'm not trying to replace his mother. I just want to make sure he's safe and supported until she's able to care for him again. If that's even possible. Let me think about this, Jessica said after a moment. In the meantime, yes, you can continue your visits. Just be mindful. Noah's been let down by a lot of adults in his life. I don't want to see him hurt again. Neither do I, Mark assured her. After hanging up, Mark sat in his car for several minutes, processing the conversation. Jessica wasn't wrong. Noah was vulnerable, and Mark needed to be careful not to make promises he couldn't keep. But the thought of stepping back from the boy's life, especially now, felt impossible. He started the car and headed toward Oakwood Elementary. It was Saturday, but he'd arranged with Principal Warren to come in and catch up on some of the cleaning he'd missed during the week. As he drove, his mind kept returning to the newspaper article and the narrative the Caldwells were constructing. The word of a respected couple against that of a 9-year-old boy with an incarcerated mother. It wasn't hard to see which way public opinion might swing. Mark's phone rang again as he pulled into the school parking lot. This time it was Principal Warren. Mark, I'm glad I caught you, she said, her voice tense. There's something you should know before you come in. Diane Caldwell's sister is Barbara Peterson. The name was familiar, but Mark couldn't immediately place it. She's on the school board, Principal Warren clarified. She's been calling this morning, asking questions about you, your employment history, any disciplinary issues, your interactions with students. I think they're looking for ways to discredit your account of finding Noah. A cold feeling settled in Mark's stomach. I see. I've told her only what's in your employment record, which is spotless, Principal Warren continued. But I wanted to warn you, this could get messy. The Caldwells have connections, and they're clearly planning to fight these charges aggressively. Thanks for the heads up, Mark said, already mentally preparing for what might come next. I appreciate it. For what it's worth, Principal Warren added, I've already spoken with our legal team. The school stands behind you completely. You followed proper protocol and reported suspected abuse immediately. There's nothing they can use against you from that angle. After hanging up, Mark sat in the empty parking lot, staring at the school building. The situation was escalating beyond what he'd anticipated. The Caldwells weren't just defending themselves. They were going on the offensive, looking for ways to undermine Noah's story and anyone who supported it. His phone buzzed with a text message from Detective Reyes. We need to talk. Something's come up with the Caldwell case. Can you meet me at the station at 3 p.m.? Mark typed a quick affirmative reply, his unease growing. Whatever Reyes had discovered, the urgency in her message suggested it wasn't good news. The police station was busier than it had been for Mark's previous interviews. He had to wait nearly 20 minutes before Detective Reyes appeared, looking tired and frustrated. Sorry to keep you waiting, she said, leading him not to an interview room but to a small office. I wanted to speak privately. She closed the door and gestured for Mark to sit. The office was cluttered with case files and family photos, one showing Reyes in hiking gear on what appeared to be a mountain trail, another of her with an older couple who shared her features. The DA's office is considering reducing the charges against the Caldwells, she said without preamble. Mark stared at her in disbelief. What? Why? You have Noah's testimony, the physical evidence, the photographs of that basement room. We also have 6 character witnesses willing to testify to the Caldwell's exemplary reputation. And Martin Cohen has submitted documents suggesting Noah has a history of behavioral issues. He's painting a picture of the Caldwells as overwhelmed but well-meaning foster parents dealing with a deeply troubled child. That's bullshit, Mark said, anger rising. Noah doesn't have behavioral issues. He's traumatized because adults keep failing him. I agree, Reyes said, her own frustration evident. But Cohen's good at what he does. He's already suggesting that Noah's injuries could have been self-inflicted, or from incidents before he was placed with the Caldwells. What about the basement room? The food deprivation? Are they denying that too? Reyes sighed. They're reframing it. They claim the room was simply a quiet space for Noah to decompress when he was overstimulated. They admit they used it as a timeout location but deny locking him in there overnight. As for the food, they say Noah has an eating disorder that preceded his placement with them, that sometimes he refuses to eat, other times he hoards food. And people are believing this? Mark couldn't keep the incredulity from his voice. Some are. Particularly those who want to believe that people like the Caldwells, educated, wealthy, community-minded, couldn't possibly be capable of the kind of cruelty Noah describes. Reyes leaned forward, her expression intense. But here's what concerns me most. Cohen has requested Noah's complete foster care records, including the notes from his previous placements. And he's asking questions about you. Mark wasn't surprised after Principal Warren's call, but hearing it confirmed still sent a chill through him. What kind of questions? Why you were alone with Noah that evening? Whether you've had similar interactions with other students? He's hinting, not very subtly, that your interest in Noah might not be entirely appropriate. The implication made Mark's stomach turn. That's despicable. It's a standard defense tactic, Reyes said. Discredit the witnesses, create alternate explanations for the evidence. Muddy the waters enough that reasonable doubt creeps in. So what do? We fight back with the truth. But I wanted to warn you, this is going to get worse before it gets better. And Noah's going to be caught in the middle of it all. Mark ran a hand through his hair, trying to process the information. Have you told Noah's social worker about this? Yes, Jessica Lynn is aware of the situation. She's concerned, obviously, but her hands are somewhat tied by the system she works within. And Noah? Does he know? Not the full extent, no. But he knows the Caldwells are claiming he's lying. That's hard enough for him to deal with. Mark thought of Noah at the Williamses' house, finally feeling safe enough to sleep through the night, to ask for seconds at dinner. The prospect of that fragile security being shattered by a protracted legal battle made him feel physically ill. There's one more thing, Reyes said, opening a folder on her desk. We've been looking into the Caldwells' history as foster parents. They've had 7 children placed with them over the past 5 years. All short-term placements, all ending with the children being moved due to what were classified as placement breakdowns or behavioral issues. 7, Mark repeated, stunned. And no one noticed a pattern? The system is overloaded and underfunded, Reyes said bluntly. Caseworkers have too many children to monitor effectively. And the Caldwells were skillful. They never crossed the line into the kind of physical abuse that would leave obvious marks until Noah. Or at least they were never caught. You said were classified as behavioral issues, Mark noted. You don't think they were? I'm trying to track down some of these children now. Most are still in the system, some have aged out. But I have a theory that we're looking at a pattern of abuse that went undetected because the Caldwells were careful and because the system is designed to give the benefit of the doubt to foster parents, not foster children. Mark thought of Noah's note, "Nobody believes foster kids." The truth of that statement was becoming clearer with each revelation. What can I do to help? He asked. Reyes considered him for a moment. Continue to be there for Noah. His testimony is going to be crucial, but a 9-year-old facing hostile questioning from someone like Cohen. She shook her head. It's going to be brutal. He'll need all the support he can get. I'll be there, Mark assured her. But Jessica Lynn seems concerned about my involvement. She thinks I might be setting Noah up for more disappointment if I get too close. Social workers have to think long-term, Reyes acknowledged. But right now, Noah needs people who believe him unequivocally. You're one of those people. Don't back away just because the situation is getting complicated. As Mark left the police station, the January sky was already darkening, though it was only mid-afternoon. He pulled his coat tighter against the cold, his mind racing with everything he'd learned. The Caldwells were mounting a defense that attacked not just the evidence but Noah himself, court-marking him as disturbed, unreliable, possibly even manipulative. Mark was so lost in thought that he almost missed the black sedan parked across from his car, or the man who emerged from it as Mark approached his vehicle. "Mr. Hunter?" "Martin Cohen." The attorney extended his hand, which Mark pointedly ignored. "I was hoping we might have a brief chat." Cohen was in his 50s, expensively dressed, with the polished appearance of someone accustomed to the camera's gaze. His smile didn't reach his eyes. "I have nothing to say to you," Mark said, moving to step around him. Cohen blocked his path, still maintaining his professional demeanor. "I think you might want to hear what I have to offer. It concerns Noah Parker's well-being." Mark stilled, wary but unwilling to walk away if Noah was involved. "What about him?" "My clients are prepared to make a very generous donation to a fund for Noah's future education. A trust that would be accessible to him when he turns 18, regardless of where he ends up being placed. In exchange, they would plead to a lesser charge, negligence rather than abuse." Mark stared at him, momentarily speechless. "Are you seriously trying to buy your client's way out of child abuse charges?" Cohen's smile tightened. "I'm trying to find a solution that benefits everyone involved. A trial would be traumatic for Noah. This way, he gets financial security for his future, and my clients avoid lengthy prison sentences that wouldn't serve anyone's interests." "Your clients locked a 9-year-old in a windowless basement room and withheld food as punishment," Mark said, his voice low and dangerous. "They beat him with a belt. And you think money makes that okay?" "I think the reality of what happened in the Caldwell home is considerably more nuanced than what a traumatized child has reported," Cohen countered smoothly. "But that's beside the point. The real question is whether you care more about punishing my clients or securing Noah's future." Mark felt a surge of pure rage. "Get out of my way. And if you ever approach me again, I'll report you to the Bar Association for witness tampering." Cohen stepped aside, his expression hardening. "That's unfortunate. I had hoped you might be reasonable." He reached into his pocket and withdrew a business card, holding it out. "If you reconsider, my offer remains open for the next 48 hours. After that, we proceed to trial, and I should warn you, I will vigorously defend my clients by any legal means necessary." The threat was thinly veiled but unmistakable. Mark ignored the card and walked to his car, his hands shaking with anger as he unlocked the door. As he drove away, he could see Cohen still standing in the parking lot, watching him leave. Mark drove without any clear destination, needing to burn off the adrenaline from the confrontation. The city passed by in a blur of winter G-Mark and sodium streetlights as the early evening settled over Boston. Eventually, he found himself near MCI Framingham, the women's prison where Noah's mother was incarcerated. He pulled into a gas station, filled his tank, and sat in his car, staring at the direction signs toward the prison. Noah's fierce loyalty to his mother echoed in his mind, along with the boy's simple hope that she might come home sooner if she completed her program. On impulse, Mark pulled out his phone and called Jessica Lynn. "This is Jessica," she answered on the third ring. "It's Mark Hunter. I need to ask you something about Noah's mother." There was a pause. "What about her? Is there any way I could speak with her? About Noah?" A longer pause this time. "That's highly unusual, Mr. Hunter. You're not family, not a designated contact. There are protocols." "I know," Mark interrupted. "But given the circumstances with the Caldwell's case, I thought it might be important for her to hear directly from someone who's been supporting Noah. Someone who can tell her he's safe now." "Noah's social services team is keeping her informed," Jessica said. "That's our responsibility, not yours." Mark took a deep breath. "Detective Reyes told me the Caldwell's attorney is building a case against Noah's credibility. He's going to drag that boy through hell in court." Noah's mother deserves to know what's happening and that there are people fighting for her son. The line was silent for so long that Mark thought Jessica might have hung up. Finally, she sighed. I can't authorize a visit. But… She hesitated. Amanda Parker has weekly phone privileges. I could ask if she'd be willing to speak with you. That's the best I can do. Thank you, Mark said, genuinely grateful. That would be very helpful. I'll call you back, Jessica said, and disconnected. Mark sat in his car as dusk deepened into night, watching the occasional vehicle pass on the nearby highway. His phone rang 15 minutes later. Amanda has agreed to speak with you, Jessica said without preamble. She can call tomorrow at 2 p.m. It will be a monitored call, 20 minutes maximum. I'll text you the details. I appreciate this, Mark said. Just be careful what you say, Jessica warned. Amanda is in a fragile state. She's been working hard on her recovery. I don't want anything to set her back. I understand. After hanging up, Mark started his car and headed home, his mind filled with questions about the woman who had given birth to Noah, who had loved him and lost him, who was now fighting her own battles while her son faced his. What would he say to her? How could he offer hope without making promises he couldn't keep? As he drove through the quiet Boston streets, Mark realized that he had crossed a threshold. What had begun as an isolated act of intervention, finding a boy hiding in a school bathroom, had evolved into something far more complex and consequential. He was now enmeshed in Noah's life in ways he hadn't anticipated, with responsibilities he was still coming to understand. And somewhere in the city, the Caldwells were plotting their defense, willing to destroy a child's credibility to save themselves. Martin Cohen's offer hung in the air like a threat, a reminder that wealth and connections could sometimes bend justice to their will. Mark's hands tightened on the steering wheel. He had once failed to protect his own son when Michael needed him most. He would not fail Noah, no matter what it cost him. Mark paced the length of his small living room, checking his watch for the third time in 5 minutes. It was 1:55 p.m., and Amanda Parker would be calling at 2 o'clock. Jessica Lynn had texted him the details that morning. The call would come from MCI Framingham. It would be recorded and monitored, and it would last exactly 20 minutes. How much could be said in 20 minutes? How could he convey the complexity of Noah's situation, the threat posed by the Caldwell's defense strategy, his own growing commitment to the boy's well-being? Mark had spent half the night rehearsing what he would say, but now, as the moment approached, all his carefully prepared words seemed inadequate. His phone rang at precisely 2 p.m. An automated voice informed him that he was receiving a call from a correctional facility and asked if he would accept the charges. After he confirmed, there was a series of clicks, and then a woman's voice, younger than he'd expected, with a slight rasp. "This is Amanda Parker. Are you Mark Hunter?" "Yes, I am," Mark said, sitting on the edge of his couch. "Thank you for agreeing to speak with me. Miss Lynn said you found my son hiding in a school bathroom." There was no preamble, just the direct approach of someone who knew the value of limited time. "She said you helped him." "That's right. Noah had been hiding there after school. He gave me a note explaining what was happening at the Caldwells." A sharp intake of breath. "I need you to tell me everything. The social worker only gave me the basics. She said Noah was being abused, but she wouldn't give me details. I need to know what they did to my boy." Mark hesitated, unsure how much Amanda could handle hearing, but equally aware of her right to know the truth about her son's suffering. "Noah was being emotionally and physically abused," he said carefully. "They were using food deprivation as punishment and locking him in a basement room overnight. There was physical abuse as well. Welts and bruises on his back and legs from being hit with a belt." "Jesus Christ," Amanda whispered, her voice breaking. "I trusted the system to keep him safe. I knew I couldn't take care of him while I got clean, but I thought." She trailed off, and Mark could hear her fighting for composure. "Is he okay now? Physically, I mean." "Yes, he's with emergency foster parents, the Williamses. They're experienced and kind. Noah seems comfortable with them." "Good, that's good." Amanda's voice steadied slightly. "Miss Lynn mentioned something about a trial?" The Caldwells have been charged with child abuse and neglect, Mark explained. But they've hired an expensive lawyer who's trying to portmark Noah as troubled and untrustworthy. They're claiming his injuries were self-inflicted and that his story is fabricated. Bastards, Amanda said, anger replacing anguish in her tone. My son doesn't lie. He never has, even when it would have made things easier for him. I believe that, Mark assured her. The problem is that the Caldwells have resources and connections. Their attorney is already trying to access Noah's complete foster care records to look for anything they can use against him. They won't find anything, Amanda said firmly. Noah's never been in trouble. The only reason he ended up in foster care was because of me, because I couldn't stay clean. The self-recrimination in her voice was painful to hear. This is my fault. All of it. No, Mark said. The only people responsible for abusing Noah are the ones who abused him. You were trying to get better for him. There was a pause, and when Amanda spoke again, her voice was quieter. Miss Lynn said you used to be a teacher. Now you're a janitor at Noah's school. That's right. And you've been visiting him? Yes. I promised him I wouldn't disappear from his life, and I intend to keep that promise. Another pause. Why? Why get involved like this? Most people would have just called CPS and been done with it. It was a fair question, one that Mark had asked himself repeatedly over the past week. Why had Noah's situation affected him so deeply? Why had he crossed the professional boundaries that would have kept him safely uninvolved? I lost my son 5 years ago, Mark said, the words emerging before he'd fully decided to share this part of himself. He was 16. An overdose. I wasn't there when he needed me most, and I've lived with that regret every day since. I'm sorry, Amanda said with genuine empathy. That's a hard thing to carry. It is. But finding Noah, seeing how desperately he needed someone to believe him, couldn't walk away. Not this time. The line was silent for a moment. Miss Lynn mentioned you're applying to become a foster parent? Yes, Mark confirmed. The process is lengthy, and there's no guarantee I'd be approved, but I wanted to try. For Noah, you'd want to foster my son specifically? There was a note of caution in her voice now. If that were possible, yes. But I understand you're working toward reunification. I am, Amanda said firmly. I've been clean for 8 months. I'm doing a treatment program here, and I have 6 months left on my sentence if everything goes well with my parole hearing. My plan is to get Noah back. That's what he wants too, Mark said. He misses you very much. He could hear the catch in Amanda's breathing. I miss him too, more than I can say. Has he been able to keep up with school through all this? He's a bright boy, Mark said, grateful for the shift to a less emotionally charged topic. The Williamses have been helping him with homework. His teachers say he's doing well considering the circumstances. He's always been smart, Amanda said, pride evident in her voice. Even before kindergarten, he was reading everything he could get his hands on. His father used to say Noah was going to be a professor someday. Mark had wondered about Noah's father but hadn't wanted to ask the boy directly. Is Noah's father involved in his life at all? No, Amanda said, her tone flat. James left when Noah was 4. Last I heard, he was in California. He doesn't pay child support, doesn't call, nothing. Before Mark could respond, an automated voice interrupted. You have 5 minutes remaining on this call. Mr. Hunter, Amanda said quickly, I need to ask you something important. If I don't get paroled, if something goes wrong with my case, would you really be willing to take care of Noah until I can? The directness of the question caught Mark off guard. Yes, he said without hesitation. But I hope it doesn't come to that. Noah needs his mother. He does, Amanda agreed. But he also needs stability and safety. I failed him once. I won't do it again. Even if that means accepting help from someone I just met over the phone. Mark was struck by her clarity, her willingness to put Noah's needs above her own pride or maternal prerogatives. It spoke to a strength of character that belied her current circumstances. Whatever happens, Mark said, I promise you I'll look out for Noah. whether that's as a foster parent, a mentor, or just a friend who believes in him. Thank you, Amanda said softly. That means more than you know. She paused. Could you tell Noah something from me? Of course. Tell him that I'm doing great in my program. Tell him I'm staying strong for him, and that I think about him every single day. Tell him that none of what happened is his fault, and that I'm so proud of how brave he's been. I will, Mark promised. And Mr. Hunter, take care of yourself too. Noah needs you healthy and whole. The automated voice returned. 1 minute remaining on this call. I should go, Amanda said. But thank you for reaching out. It helps to know there's someone looking out for my son. I'll keep you updated through Jessica Lynn, Mark assured her. And Amanda, Noah's going to get through this. He's a resilient kid. Like his mom, she replied, with the ghost of a smile in her voice. Goodbye, Mr. Hunter. The line went dead, leaving Mark sitting in the silence of his apartment, holding a phone that suddenly felt heavier in his hand. The conversation had been brief but consequential. He had connected with Noah's mother, had promised her he would look after her son, had somehow found himself making commitments that would have seemed unthinkable 2 weeks ago, and yet it felt right, as if the trajectory of his life had been leading to this moment, this choice, this child who needed precisely what Mark had to give. His phone buzzed with a text message from Detective Reyes. We found one of the Caldwell's former foster children. She's willing to talk. Can you meet us at the station at 4 p.m.? Mark typed a quick reply. I'll be there. The girl sitting across from Mark and Detective Reyes looked older than her 16 years. Ellie Morgan had been placed with the Caldwells for 4 months when she was 11, before being moved due to what her file described as escalating behavioral issues. They seemed so perfect at first, she said, her fingers fidgeting with the sleeve of her oversized sweater. The house was beautiful. They had this room all decorated for me with a canopy bed and everything. Mrs. Caldwell would bake cookies when my social worker came to visit. But as soon as she left, Ellie trailed off, staring at a point somewhere beyond Mark's shoulder. Take your time, Reyes said gently. Whatever you can tell us will help Noah. The mention of Noah seemed to strengthen Ellie's resolve. It started with little things. If I didn't finish my dinner, I wouldn't get breakfast the next day. If I left a towel on the bathroom floor, I'd lose TV privileges for a week. The punishments never matched what I'd done wrong. Were you ever physically harmed? Reyes asked. Ellie shook her head. Not exactly. Mr. Caldwell would grab my arm really hard sometimes, hard enough to leave bruises. But he never hit me. She looked down at her hands. The basement room came later. Mark felt a chill at the mention of the room Noah had described in his note. Can you tell us about that? Reyes prompted. It was supposed to be for reflection, Ellie said, making air quotes with her fingers. If I broke a rule or even if I just asked too many questions about when I could see my dad, they'd send me down there to think about my choices. At first, it was just for an hour or so. But it got longer. The longest was a whole weekend. A whole weekend? Mark couldn't keep the shock from his voice. They left you in there from Friday to Sunday? Ellie nodded. Mrs. Caldwell would bring down a sandwich and some water twice a day. There was a bucket in the corner to use as a toilet. Her voice had become flat, detached, as if she were describing something that had happened to someone else. The worst part was the dark. There's no light switch inside, so when they turned off the light from outside and closed the door, it was pitch black. Mark thought of Noah, 9 years old, trapped in that darkness, and felt a surge of pure rage. Did you tell anyone? Reyes asked. I tried. I told my social worker, but the Caldwells said I was making it up for attention. They said I had attachment issues because of my dad being in and out of my life. Ellie's eyes darkened with remembered helplessness. They even had this child psychologist they were friends with who backed them up. Said I was fabricating stories because I couldn't accept that my dad had abandoned me. And your social worker believed them, Reyes said. It wasn't a question. Everyone believed them. They were the perfect foster parents, you know? They volunteered, they went to church, they had this beautiful house. I was just a messed up kid with a dad in jail. Ellie's bitterness was palpable. After a while, I stopped trying to tell people. What was the point? What happened when you left their home? Mark asked. I got placed with the Maynards. They were okay, strict but fair. I aged out of their home last year when I turned 16. Now I'm in a transitional living program. Reyes jotted something in her notebook. Ellie, would you be willing to testify about your experiences with the Caldwells? It would help establish a pattern of abuse that could be crucial for Noah's case. The girl tensed visibly. Testify? Like, in court? Yes. You'd be asked questions about what you've told us today. Ellie looked away, conflict evident in her expression. I don't know. The Caldwells. They know people. What if it affects my housing situation? I barely got into this program. We can ensure that doesn't happen, Reyes assured her. Your testimony would be protected, and there are resources to support you. Can I think about it? Ellie asked quietly. Of course, Reyes said. Take all the time you need. As they prepared to leave, Ellie suddenly reached out and touched Mark's arm. Is he okay? Noah. He's safe now, Mark said. He's with good people. That's good. She hesitated. When you see him, can you tell him something from me? Of course. Tell him I believe him. Tell him he's not alone. Her eyes, which had been guarded throughout their conversation, suddenly shimmered with unshed tears. And tell him it wasn't his fault. None of it was his fault. The week that followed brought both progress and setbacks. On the positive side, Detective Reyes located 2 more former foster children who had been placed with the Caldwells, both now adults in their early 20s, both with similar stories of emotional abuse, food deprivation, and isolation in the basement room. One agreed to testify. The other, now a young mother herself, declined, unwilling to revisit that period of her life. On the negative side, Martin Cohen filed a motion to suppress Noah's note, arguing it had been obtained improperly. The judge denied the motion, but the attempt signaled that the Caldwells' defense would be aggressive and relentless. Mark visited Noah twice that week, mindful of Jessica Lynn's concerns about creating unrealistic expectations. Each time, he found the boy a little more settled, a little less guarded. The Williamses were creating a stable environment where Noah was gradually rediscovering what it meant to feel safe. We had pizza for dinner yesterday, Noah told Mark during their Saturday visit. Martha let me choose the toppings. I picked pepperoni and mushrooms. Such a simple thing, being allowed to choose pizza toppings, but Mark understood the significance. At the Caldwells, Noah's preferences had been irrelevant, his desires subordinate to their control. Excellent choice, Mark said, helping Noah arrange puzzle pieces on the Williamses' dining room table. My son Michael loved mushroom pizza too. Noah glanced up. You don't get sad anymore when you talk about him. The observation startled Mark with its accuracy. I still feel sad, he clarified. But I guess I'm finding it easier to remember the good things, not just the loss. Noah nodded sagely. That's what Martha says about grief, that it changes over time, but it doesn't go away completely. Martha's right, Mark said, impressed by the foster mother's wisdom and by Noah's ability to absorb it. Noah fitted a puzzle piece into place, his small fingers deft and precise. Mr. Hunter? Yes. Miss Lynn said my mom called her yesterday. She said Mom asked about you. Mark nodded, choosing his words carefully. I spoke with your mom earlier this week. She wanted to know that you were safe. Noah's eyes widened. You talked to my mom? On the phone. Yes, she's doing well in her program. She said to tell you that she thinks about you every day and that she's very proud of how brave you've been. Noah's face lit up, then crumpled slightly. I miss her so much. I know you do, buddy, Mark said gently. She misses you too, and she's working really hard to get better so you can be together again. Do you think that will really happen? Noah's voice was small, vulnerable. Your mom is determined, Mark said, and she loves you very much. That counts for a lot. They worked on the puzzle in silence for a few minutes before Noah spoke again. The police lady came to talk to me yesterday, Detective Reyes. She said I might have to go to court and answer questions. Mark had known this was coming but still felt a surge of protectiveness. That's right. But Detective Reyes and other people from the courthouse will help prepare you. And you'll just need to tell the truth, like you always have. What if they don't believe me? What if they believe the Caldwells instead? It was the fear that haunted Mark as well, that the Caldwells' resources and reputation might prevail over Noah's truth. But he couldn't burden the boy with his own anxieties. There's evidence beyond just your word, Mark said. The photographs from the hospital, the basement room, and now other children who had similar experiences with the Caldwells. The truth has a way of coming out, even when people try to hide it. Noah seemed to consider this. Martha says I'm safe no matter what happens with the trial. That I'll never have to go back to the Caldwells. Martha's right, Mark assured him. You're not going back there no matter what. Good. Noah fitted another puzzle piece into place. Because I'd run away if they tried to send me back. I'd hide someplace where they'd never find me. The matter-of-fact way he said it sent a chill through Mark. The certainty of a child who had already calculated his escape routes, who had learned to rely on his own resources when adults failed him. It won't come to that, Mark said firmly. But if you ever feel scared or uncertain about what's happening, you can always call me, day or night. Remember? Noah nodded solemnly. I remember. As their visit concluded, Martha pulled Mark aside while Noah said goodbye to Thomas, who was leaving for his shift at the hospital where he worked as a nurse. He's been asking about you, Martha said quietly, wondering if you'll still visit after the trial is over. Of course I will, Mark said without hesitation. Martha studied him with kind but shrewd eyes. Foster children learn to guard their hearts, Mr. Hunter. They've been let down too many times. Noah is starting to trust you, to rely on you. That's a precious thing, but also a heavy responsibility. I understand, Mark said, and I don't take it lightly. I believe you, Martha said with a slight smile. My husband and I have been doing this for 3 decades. We've seen all types come through these doors, the well-meaning but overwhelmed, the saviors looking for gratitude, the ones who can't separate their own needs from the child's. You're not any of those. What am I, then? Mark asked, genuinely curious about her assessment. Someone who recognizes a second chance when it appears, Martha said simply. For both of you. On Monday morning, Mark received an unexpected call from Jessica Lynn. I need your help with something, she said after brief pleasantries. It's about Noah's placement after the Williamses. Mark's pulse quickened. Has something been decided? Not yet, but we're exploring options. The Williamses are emergency foster parents. They're not set up for long-term placement. Noah needs stability, especially with the trial coming up. I've started the foster parent certification process, Mark reminded her. But I know it takes months. Normally, yes, Jessica agreed. But there's a provision for expedited certification in cases where there's an established relationship with a specific child and extenuating circumstances. I've been speaking with my supervisor about the possibility of initiating that process for you. Mark was momentarily speechless. After their earlier conversation, he'd assumed Jessica was reluctant to consider him as a potential placement for Noah. What changed your mind? He asked finally. Several things, Jessica said. Your conversation with Amanda Parker, for one. She called me afterward, quite insistent that you should be considered if she isn't able to regain custody immediately. The Williamses have also reported that Noah shows marked improvement after your visits. And Detective Reyes speaks highly of your commitment to seeing justice done in this case. I'm grateful, Mark managed. What would this expedited process involve? It's still thorough, Jessica cautioned. Background checks, home study, training sessions. But it could be completed in weeks rather than months. You'd need to be prepared for a significant life change, Mr. Hunter. Fostering isn't like mentoring or occasional visits. I understand, Mark said. I've been doing research, taking the preliminary online courses. I know it won't be easy. And your work schedule? Night janitorial duties aren't exactly compatible with caring for a school-aged child. I've already spoken with Principal Warren about the possibility of shifting to day shifts, Mark said. There's an opening in the maintenance department that would allow me to work while Noah's in school. Jessica made a sound of approval. You've thought this through. That's good. She paused. There's something else you should know. The DA's office has scheduled Noah's testimony for February 15th. That's less than 3 weeks away. Mark's stomach tightened. So soon. They want to move quickly while the evidence is fresh and before Noah has time to be influenced by others. Martin Cohen pushed for it, actually. He's banking on Noah being too frightened or confused to testify effectively. That's despicable, Mark said, anger flaring. Noah's just a child. I know, Jessica said, her own frustration evident. But the judge agreed to the timeline. Noah will have preparation sessions with a victim advocate from the DA's office starting next week. Will I be allowed to be there? For the testimony? Not in the courtroom during his testimony, no. But you can certainly be there before and after to provide support. Mark thought of Noah facing cross-examination from someone like Martin Cohen. Calculated, manipulative, willing to twist a child's words to serve his client's interests. The thought made him ill. He's going to need all the support he can get, Mark said. Not just from me, but from everyone who cares about him. I agree, Jessica said. Which is why I've also arranged something else I wanted to discuss with you. Amanda Parker has requested a supervised visit with Noah. Given the circumstances, the Department of Corrections has approved it for this Sunday. I was hoping you might be willing to accompany Noah, along with myself. The request caught Mark by surprise. Me? Wouldn't that usually be the foster parents? Usually, yes, but the Williamses have a prior commitment they can't reschedule, and Noah has specifically asked if you could come. Amanda is also supportive of the idea, after your conversation with her. Then of course I'll do it, Mark said without hesitation. Good. I'll text you the details. It will be at MCI Framingham, in their family visitation room. 2 hours maximum. After hanging up, Mark sat at his kitchen table, processing the developments. An expedited foster certification process. Noah's court testimony scheduled. A visit with Amanda Parker. Everything was moving faster than he'd anticipated, momentum building toward. What? A resolution? A new beginning? Both seemed possible now in ways they hadn't just days ago. His phone buzzed with a text message from an unknown number. Ellie Morgan here. Detective Reyes gave me your number. I've decided to testify. For Noah. Can we talk? Mark typed a quick response. Absolutely. Would you like to meet in person? Her reply came moments later. Yes. Tomorrow. There's a coffee shop near my program building. Blackbird Cafe on Washington St. 4 p.m.? Mark confirmed the meeting, hope rising in his chest. With Ellie's testimony, along with the other former foster child who had agreed to speak, the pattern of the Caldwell's abuse would be difficult for even Martin Cohen to explain away. Ellie was waiting at a corner table when Mark arrived at the Blackbird Cafe the next afternoon. She looked younger in daylight, her posture less defensive, though she still carried herself with the wariness of someone accustomed to disappointment. Thanks for meeting me, she said as Mark sat across from her. I wanted to explain why I changed my mind about testifying. I'm listening, Mark said, accepting the coffee she had already ordered for him. After we talked, I couldn't stop thinking about Noah, about how young he is, younger than I was when I was with the Caldwells. She traced the rim of her mug with her finger. I kept remembering how it felt when no one believed me, when everyone took their side. I don't want him to go through that. Your testimony could make a real difference, Mark assured her. It establishes a pattern of behavior that can't be dismissed as one child's misunderstanding or fabrication. Ellie nodded. Detective Reyes said the same thing. She also said. She hesitated. She said you're trying to become Noah's foster parent. I've started the process, Mark confirmed. Whether it happens depends on many factors, including what's best for Noah. I think it's good, Ellie said decisively. He needs someone who believes him, someone who'll fight for him. I didn't have that. The simple declaration, delivered without self-pity but as a statement of fact, reminded Mark how fortunate Noah was in comparison to many children in the system. Despite everything, he had people advocating for him: Mark, Detective Reyes, the Williamses, even his mother from behind prison walls. "Can I ask you something personal?" Ellie continued. When Mark nodded, she went on. "Detective Reyes mentioned you lost your son. Is that why you're doing this for Noah? Because of what happened to your son?" The question was direct but not unkind. Mark considered his answer carefully. "Partly," he admitted. "When you lose a child, there's a hole that nothing can fill. But it's not just about that. It's about Noah himself. His courage, his resilience, the way he still hopes for better despite everything he's been through." Ellie seemed satisfied with this answer. "That's good. Because he needs you for him, not just because of what happened before." "I know," Mark said, struck by her insight. "And I'm trying to be very clear about that distinction, both with myself and with the people evaluating my fitness as a foster parent." They spoke for nearly an hour, Mark sharing more details about Noah's current situation and the upcoming trial, Ellie offering insights from her own experience that might help prepare both Mark and Noah for what lay ahead. As they prepared to leave, Ellie handed Mark a sealed envelope. "Could you give this to Noah? It's a letter. I thought it might help to know he's not the only one who went through this, that someone else made it out the other side." Mark accepted the envelope, touched by her gesture. "I'll make sure he gets it." And Ellie hesitated, suddenly looking younger and more vulnerable. "Could you let me know how the trial goes? How he does?" "Of course," Mark promised. "And Ellie, thank you for your courage. It means more than you know." She shrugged, uncomfortable with the praise, but a small smile played at the corners of her mouth. "Just tell Noah to stay strong. The Caldwells don't get to win this time." Sunday morning dawned cold and clear, the January sun bright but offering little warmth. Mark drove to the Williamses' home to pick up Noah for the prison visit. His car freshly cleaned and his clothes carefully chosen for the occasion. Not too formal, but respectful of the significance of the day. Noah was waiting on the front steps, a small backpack clutched in his hands, his face a mixture of excitement and apprehension. He wore a button-down shirt with his jeans, clearly dressed with special care. "Hey, buddy," Mark greeted him as he got out of the car. "Ready for today?" Noah nodded, though his grip on the backpack tightened. "I made Mom a card. Martha helped me. Do you think they'll let me give it to her?" "I'm sure they will," Mark assured him, opening the passenger door. "Jessica will meet us there to help with all the procedures." As they drove toward MCI Framingham, Noah grew increasingly quiet, staring out the window at the winter landscape passing by. "Nervous?" Mark asked gently. "A little," Noah admitted. "It's been a long time since I saw Mom. Almost a year. That is a long time. What if she looks different? What if she doesn't recognize me?" The fear in his voice made Mark's heart ache. "She'll recognize you, Noah. Mothers always do. And even if she looks a little different, she's still your mom." Noah seemed to accept this. "Did you tell her about the Caldwells? About what they did?" "Yes," Mark said carefully. "She needed to know what happened. She was very upset that you were hurt, but very proud of how brave you've been." "Is she mad at me? For not telling someone sooner?" "Not at all," Mark assured him. "She understands why it was hard to speak up. She just wants you to be safe now." They drove in silence for a few minutes before Noah spoke again. "Miss Lynn says Mom might get out sooner than we thought, if her parole hearing goes well." "That's right. She's been doing very well in her recovery program. If she gets out, we could be together again," Noah said, hope and uncertainty mingling in his voice. "But she'd need to have a job and a place for us to live. Miss Lynn says that's not easy when you have a record." The pragmatic understanding of these adult challenges was jarring coming from a 9-year-old, another reminder of how Noah had been forced to grow up too quickly. "There are programs to help people in your mom's situation," Mark said. "And she has people supporting her, just like you do." Noah nodded, his gaze returning to the window. "I'm glad you're coming with me today," he said after a moment. "I didn't want to go by myself." "I'm glad too," Mark said, meaning it completely. They arrived at MCI Framingham 15 minutes early. Jessica Lynn was already waiting in the visitors' parking lot, clipboard in hand. She went over the visitation rules with them. No physical contact except for a brief hug at the beginning and end. No passing of items without officer approval. No discussion of certain topics including details of the Caldwell's case. The visit will last exactly 90 minutes, she explained. I'll be present the entire time, but I'll try to give you as much privacy as possible within the guidelines. The check-in process was lengthy and somewhat intimidating, especially for Noah, who watched wide-eyed as they passed through metal detectors and various security checkpoints. Mark kept a reassuring hand on his shoulder, quietly narrating each step to help ease the boy's anxiety. Finally, they were led to the visitation room, a large space with several small tables, each with chairs on opposite sides. The room was designed to balance security with some semblance of normal interaction, but the presence of corrections officers at regular intervals around the perimeter made the setting impossible to forget. Your mother will be brought in shortly, Jessica told Noah, guiding him to one of the empty tables. Remember, you can give her the card you made, but the officers will need to check it first. Noah nodded, his hands trembling slightly as he removed the card from his backpack and handed it to one of the officers. Mark sat beside him, close enough to offer support but positioned so he wouldn't interfere with Noah's direct line to where his mother would sit. A door at the far end of the room opened, and Amanda Parker entered, escorted by a female corrections officer. She wore the standard prison uniform, khaki pants and a light blue shirt, but had clearly taken pains with her appearance. Her brown hair, the same shade as Noah's, was neatly styled, and there was a nervous anticipation in her movements as her eyes scanned the room. The moment she spotted Noah, her face transformed with a joy so pure it was almost painful to witness. Noah stood, frozen for a second, then ran toward her, stopping just short of the distance they were allowed to embrace. "Mom," he said, the word carrying the weight of months of separation. "My baby," Amanda replied, kneeling to his level and opening her arms. They hugged fiercely, the correctional officer watching but allowing the moment to extend a few seconds beyond regulation. When they separated, both were crying, though Amanda quickly wiped her eyes, visibly trying to stay composed for her son's sake. Mark and Jessica hung back, giving mother and son this crucial reunion time. As they moved to the table, Amanda's eyes met Mark's over Noah's head. She gave him a small nod of recognition and gratitude, which he returned with a subtle smile. For the next hour, Mark observed the reunion from a respectful distance, close enough to provide support if needed but far enough to allow for privacy. Noah showed Amanda his card, a construction paper creation decorated with carefully drawn stars, and a message declaring her the best mom ever. He told her about school, about the Williamses, about the books he'd been reading. Amanda listened with complete attention, asking questions, laughing at his small jokes, reaching across the table occasionally to touch his hand when the officers weren't looking directly at them. It was only in the final 30 minutes that Amanda motioned for Mark to join them. "Noah's been telling me how much you've helped him," she said as Mark sat down. "I can't thank you enough." "There's no need," Mark said. "Noah's a special kid." "He is," Amanda agreed, her eyes softening as she looked at her son. "The best thing I ever did." Noah beamed at his mother's praise. "Mr. Hunter's been visiting me at the Williamses' house. He brings books sometimes. And he's going to be at the courthouse when I have to testify." "That's good," Amanda said. "It helps to have someone you trust nearby during hard things." "Mom," Noah's voice grew serious. "Miss Lynn says you might get out sooner. Is that true?" Amanda glanced at Jessica, who nodded slightly, before answering. "I have a parole hearing next month. If it goes well, yes, I might be released early. But Noah, I don't want you to get your hopes too high. There are no guarantees. But if you do get out," Noah pressed, "we could be together again, right?" The question hung in the air, weighted with all the complexity of their situation. Amanda looked to Jessica again, clearly wanting to be honest without making promises she couldn't keep. "That's the goal," Jessica interjected gently. "But there would be steps involved. Your mom would need stable housing, employment, and to continue her recovery program on the outside. It's a process, Noah. Noah absorbed this information, his expression thoughtful. I could help, he offered. I'm good at keeping things organized. And I can cook mac and cheese and sandwiches. Amanda's eyes filled with tears. Oh, honey, you don't need to worry about taking care of me. That's my job, taking care of you. And I'm going to do it right this time, I promise. Noah nodded, but Mark could see the adult calculations continuing behind his eyes. The assessing of possibilities, the planning for contingencies, the habit of self-reliance that had been necessary for his survival. Mr. Hunter says he might become a foster parent, Noah said suddenly, looking between his mother and Mark. If you can't come get me right away when you get out. Amanda met Mark's gaze, something unspoken passing between them. An acknowledgement of their shared concern for this child. A tentative alliance forged across unlikely circumstances. I think that would be good, Amanda said carefully, until we can be together again. Mr. Hunter seems like someone who keeps his promises. I try to, Mark said simply. As the visit neared its end, an officer approached to give them the 5-minute warning. Noah's face fell, the impending separation already casting its shadow. It's not goodbye, Amanda said firmly, reaching for her son's hands. It's just see you later. I'm not going anywhere, Noah. I'm getting better, and I'm coming back for you. I need you to believe that. I do, Noah said, his voice small but determined. I believe you, Mom. The final moments were difficult. The last hug, the whispered, I love you. The way Noah's eyes followed his mother as she was escorted back through the door she'd entered from. But as they drove away from the prison, Mark noticed a subtle change in the boy's demeanor. A lightness that hadn't been there before, as if seeing his mother had restored some essential faith. She looked good, Noah said eventually, breaking the silence. Better than last time. She did, Mark agreed. She seems very focused on getting better for you. Noah nodded, gazing out the window. Mr. Hunter? He asked after a while. Yes. If Mom gets out, but she needs time to get a job and a place for us to live. Would it be okay if I stayed with you? Just until she's ready. The question, asked with such transparent hope and vulnerability, caught Mark by surprise. He glanced at Noah, this boy who had endured so much and still managed to maintain his capacity for trust. If that's what you want, Mark said carefully. And if the court approves, I would be honored to have you stay with me, Noah, for as long as you need. Noah smiled, a genuine, unguarded smile that transformed his face. Good, he said simply. That's what I want too. As they drove back toward Boston, the winter sun beginning its early descent, Mark felt something shift into place within him. A sense of purpose more defined than anything he'd felt since Michael's death. Whatever challenges lay ahead, Noah's testimony, the trial, the complexities of the foster care system, they would face them together. Not as a replacement for Noah's mother, but as an additional support, another adult committed to ensuring this remarkable child had the future he deserved. For the first time in years, Mark found himself looking forward rather than back, drawn by the promise of tomorrow rather than the weight of yesterday. The shadows would always be there, for both of them, but perhaps together they could step into the light. 6 months later, on a warm July morning, Mark stood in the kitchen of his new apartment, preparing breakfast. Through the open window came the sounds of summer. Birds, distant lawnmowers, children's voices from the playground in the courtyard. The 2-bedroom unit in Jamaica Plain was a far cry from his old place. Brighter, more spacious, with walls freshly painted in colors chosen with careful deliberation. Noah, breakfast in 5 minutes. He called toward the 2nd bedroom, where Noah was supposedly getting dressed for the day's activities. The past 6 months had transformed both their lives in ways neither could have anticipated on that January evening when Mark had found a frightened boy hiding in a school bathroom. The Caldwell's trial had lasted 3 weeks. Noah's testimony, though grueling, had been compelling. His simple, straightforward account of the abuse leaving little room for doubt. Ellie Morgan had testified as well, along with 2 other former foster children, establishing a pattern that even Martin Cohen couldn't explain away. The physical evidence, the photographs, and expert testimony from child welfare professionals had completed the prosecution's case. In the end, Gregory and Diane Caldwell had been convicted on multiple counts of child abuse, neglect, and endangerment. Gregory received a 6-year sentence. Diane, 4 years. Their perfect facade had finally crumbled, revealing the cruelty that had always lurked beneath. For Noah, the conclusion of the trial had brought both relief and new uncertainties. Amanda Parker's parole hearing, scheduled for early March, had been successful, largely due to her exemplary record in the prison's rehabilitation program. She was released in mid-April to a transitional living facility in Dorchester, where she continued outpatient treatment and began working at a local bakery through a second chance employment program. Mark's expedited foster parent certification had been approved in record time, supported by recommendations from Detective Reyes, Principal Warren, Jessica Lynn, and even the Williamses. Noah had moved in with Mark in late February, initially as an emergency placement following the trial, then as a formal foster arrangement while Amanda worked toward reunification. The transition hadn't been seamless. Noah had nightmares in the beginning, waking in panic, confused about where he was. Mark had spent many nights sitting beside the boy's bed, offering quiet reassurance until sleep returned. There had been behavioral challenges too, moments of testing boundaries, of retreat into silence when emotions became overwhelming, of fierce independence that sometimes bordered on self-isolation. But there had also been breakthroughs. The first time Noah genuinely laughed at one of Mark's terrible jokes. The Saturday morning they spent building a model airplane together. The parent-teacher conference where Noah's progress had been celebrated. The casual way the boy had begun to refer to Mark's apartment as home. Now, 6 months later, they had settled into a rhythm that worked for both of them. Mark had transferred to the day maintenance crew at Oakwood, working hours that aligned with Noah's school schedule. Weekends were filled with trips to museums, parks, and occasional baseball games. Mark slowly introducing Noah to experiences he'd missed during his turbulent early childhood. Most importantly, Mark had made good on his promise to support Noah's relationship with his mother. Amanda visited at least twice a week, sometimes staying for dinner, gradually rebuilding her bond with her son. The three of them had developed an unconventional but functional family dynamic, united by their shared commitment to Noah's well-being. "Coming," Noah called, his footsteps thundering down the hallway. He appeared in the kitchen doorway, dressed in shorts and a Red Sox t-shirt, his hair still rumpled from sleep. At 9.5, he'd grown an inch since coming to live with Mark, and the haunted look that had once shadowed his eyes was rarely visible now. "Pancakes?" he asked hopefully, spotting the bowl of batter on the counter. "Blueberry," Mark confirmed, pouring the first ladleful onto the griddle. "Today's a big day. Thought we should start it right." Noah slid into his seat at the kitchen table, already set with plates, glasses, and a bottle of maple syrup. "Mom's nervous," he said, pouring himself orange juice. "She called last night after you were asleep." Mark nodded, unsurprised. "That's understandable. Job interviews are stressful for everyone." Today marked an important milestone in Amanda's recovery journey, an interview at a catering company that partnered with her transitional program. The position would offer more stable hours and better pay than the bakery, bringing her another step closer to independent living and, ultimately, regaining custody of Noah. "She's going to do great," Noah said with the absolute confidence of a child in his parent. "She's been practicing answers with Miss Tanya all week." Tanya was Amanda's case manager at the transitional facility. "I'm sure she has," Mark agreed, flipping a perfectly golden pancake. "Your mom's worked incredibly hard to get to this point." Noah fidgeted with his fork. "If she gets this job and then finds an apartment like she wants to, I'd be going to live with her, right? That's the plan." The question contained layers of emotion that Mark had come to recognize. Hope for reunification with his mother, anxiety about another transition, and perhaps some uncertainty about leaving the stability he'd found with Mark. "That is the plan," Mark confirmed gently, placing a stack of pancakes on Noah's plate. "But it will happen in stages, not all at once. Weekend visits first, then maybe some overnight stays. Your mom and I have talked about it. We both want to make sure the transition is smooth for you." Noah nodded, seeming relieved by the measured approach. Would I still see you? After I go live with Mom? Absolutely, Mark said without hesitation. That's not even a question, buddy. Your mom and I have talked about that too. I'll still be part of your life, just in a different way. This arrangement had been one of the first and most important discussions between Mark and Amanda, establishing that regardless of the legal custodial situation, they would ensure Noah maintained connections with all the supportive adults in his life. Unlike many foster situations where biological parents and foster parents became adversaries, they had formed an alliance centered on Noah's needs. Good, Noah said, drowning his pancakes in syrup, because I was thinking maybe we could still do baseball on Saturdays. And Mom doesn't really like museums as much as you do. Mark smiled, touched by the boys' straightforward planning. I think that sounds perfect. Now eat up before those pancakes float away on that syrup lake you've created. As they ate breakfast, they reviewed the day's schedule. After dropping Noah at his summer day camp, Mark would meet with Jessica Lynn for their monthly check-in, then head to work. Amanda would come by after her interview to have dinner and share the results, regardless of the outcome. Do you think we could plant those sunflower seeds tonight? Noah asked as he helped clear the dishes. The ones Ellie sent in the mail? Ellie Morgan had remained a peripheral but important presence in their lives. After testifying at the trial, she decided to become an advocate for foster children, speaking at community forums and even testifying before a state legislative committee considering reforms to the foster care system. She occasionally sent Noah cards and small gifts, a connection that seemed to benefit them both. Definitely, Mark agreed. I picked up some pots yesterday. We can plant them on the balcony. Noah beamed, pleased with the plan. They'll grow really tall. Ellie said they might even get taller than you. Well, now that's a challenge, Mark joked. Me against the sunflowers. Noah giggled, the sound still relatively new and precious. My money's on the sunflowers. Jessica Lynn was waiting at their usual meeting spot, a cafe equidistant between Mark's apartment and the Department of Children and Families office where she worked. After 6 months of regular meetings, they had developed an easy professional rapport, their initial wariness replaced by mutual respect. Mark, she greeted him, already seated with 2 coffees on the table. Right on time as usual. One of the few benefits of working in a school, you become pathologically punctual. He settled across from her, accepting the coffee with a nod of thanks. Jessica smiled, opening her tablet to access her notes. So, how are things since our last meeting? Any concerns or challenges with Noah? He's doing well overall, Mark reported. The nightmares have decreased to maybe once every couple of weeks, usually after something specific triggers memories. A loud noise, someone raising their voice unexpectedly. His summer reading program is going great. His teacher says he's reading 2 grade levels above average. That's excellent, Jessica noted. And socially? You mentioned last time he was having some difficulty connecting with peers. Mark nodded. He's made progress there too. 2 friends from camp came over last weekend for a movie night. He was nervous beforehand but enjoyed it once they arrived. The school counselor thinks his social anxiety is normal given his history, not something that requires intervention at this point. And how about his relationship with Amanda? Any changes or issues there? Stronger every week, Mark said. Noah's definitely more relaxed with her now, less worried about saying or doing the wrong thing. They're rebuilding their connection at a good pace. Jessica made notes as they talked, occasionally asking clarifying questions. And how are you holding up? She asked eventually. Fostering is demanding work, especially with a child who's experienced trauma. I'm good, Mark said honestly. There are challenging days, of course, but they're outweighed by the good ones. The parent support group you recommended has been helpful. It's reassuring to hear from others facing similar situations. I'm glad to hear that, Jessica said. Now, there's something specific I wanted to discuss today. Amanda's case manager has submitted her 3-month progress report, and it's extremely positive. Amanda has maintained sobriety, excelled in her outpatient treatment program, held steady employment, and demonstrated consistent commitment to rebuilding her relationship with Noah. Mark nodded, unsurprised by the positive assessment. He'd witnessed Amanda's dedication firsthand. That's great news. It is, Jessica agreed. Based on this progress, we're recommending moving forward with the next phase of reunification. Assuming Amanda secures the new position and appropriate housing, we'd like to begin overnight visits within the next month, progressing to weekends, and potentially full reunification by the end of the year. Though Mark had always known this was the plan, had, in fact, actively supported it, the timeline suddenly felt accelerated. He experienced a momentary tightness in his chest at the thought of Noah leaving, but quickly pushed it aside. This wasn't about him. It was about what was best for Noah. That seems appropriate, he said carefully. Noah's ready. He still has moments of anxiety about transitions, but he's much more resilient now. Jessica studied him with the perceptiveness that made her effective at her job. This is the goal we've all been working toward, but I know it won't be easy for you, Mark. You and Noah have formed a significant bond. We have, Mark acknowledged, but I've always been clear with Noah, with Amanda, with myself about my role. I'm here to support him until he can reunify with his mother, and then to remain a positive presence in his life afterward. That hasn't changed. It's still a loss, Jessica pointed out gently. It's okay to acknowledge that. Mark hadn't expected such empathy from the social worker who had once been cautious about his involvement with Noah. Thank you, he said simply. I'm focusing on what we've gained, not what might be ending. Noah and Amanda have a second chance at being a family. That's worth everything. Jessica nodded, seeming satisfied with his perspective. There's something else I wanted to mention. Given your success with Noah, the department would be interested in placing another child with you in the future, if you're open to continuing as a foster parent. The suggestion caught Mark by surprise. I hadn't thought about it, he admitted. My focus has been entirely on Noah. You don't need to decide now, Jessica assured him. But you've demonstrated exceptional skills with a traumatized child. We always need foster parents who can provide that level of care and understanding. As they wrapped up their meeting, Mark found himself contemplating Jessica's words. Could he do for another child what he'd done for Noah? The prospect was both daunting and oddly compelling. I'll think about it, he promised as they parted. After Noah's transition is complete. Mark arrived home that evening to find Amanda already there, helping Noah with a complex Lego structure on the living room floor. She looked up with a broad smile that immediately revealed the outcome of her interview. You got it, Mark exclaimed, setting down his bag. I start next Monday, she confirmed, her pride evident. Full-time, benefits after 90 days, and they work with my treatment schedule. Mom's going to make fancy food for rich people's parties, Noah explained, carefully attaching a tiny Lego window. And sometimes they let her bring leftovers home. Congratulations, Mark said sincerely. That's fantastic news, Amanda. Couldn't have done it without your support, she replied. Seriously, Mark, having a stable place for Noah, knowing he was safe and cared for, it let me focus on my recovery in a way I couldn't have otherwise. The acknowledgement was characteristic of Amanda's approach to their unusual situation. Direct, honest, and generous in giving credit. Over the months, Mark had come to deeply respect her determination and resilience. The woman before him bore little resemblance to the struggling addict who had lost custody of her son. This Amanda Parker was focused, grounded, and fiercely committed to rebuilding her life. I have other news too, she continued, her expression a mixture of excitement and nerves. My housing application was approved. I've been assigned a 2-bedroom unit in the transitional housing complex on Dorchester Avenue. It's subsidized for the first year while I build up savings. Mom showed me pictures, Noah interjected. There's a park across the street with a basketball court. That's great timing, Mark said, genuinely pleased for her progress even as he registered what it meant for the timeline Jessica had outlined earlier. When do you move in? 2 weeks, Amanda said. It's partly furnished, but I'll need to get a few things for Noah's room. Nothing fancy, just the basics to start. My bed and desk from here could go there, Noah suggested, looking between the adults. Right? since I'll be staying over sometimes. The simplicity of his proposed solution, so practical, so direct, was quintessentially Noah. Both adults smiled at his problem-solving approach. That's very thoughtful, Mark said. We can definitely arrange that when the time comes. They prepared dinner together, falling into the comfortable routine they'd established during Amanda's visits. Noah setting the table, Amanda making a salad, Mark handling the main course. The domesticity of it still occasionally struck Mark as surreal. This makeshift family they'd created from circumstances none of them would have chosen. After dinner, as promised, they planted Ellie's sunflower seeds in bright blue pots on the small balcony. Noah carefully measured the soil, the water, the distance between seeds, following the instructions with scientific precision. Now we have to wait, he announced, patting the soil gently. They'll take about a week to sprout, but then they grow really fast. Just like some boys I know, Amanda remarked, ruffling his hair affectionately. Seems like you've grown 2 inches just since I got out. Noah beamed at the comparison. Ellie says sunflowers always turn their faces to follow the sun. Even on cloudy days, they know where it is. Smart flowers, Mark observed, thinking how apt the metaphor was for Noah himself. A child who had somehow managed to orient toward light and growth, despite the shadows that had darkened his early years. Later, after Amanda had left for her evening program meeting and Noah was getting ready for bed, Mark found himself thinking about the conversation with Jessica, about the upcoming changes, about what would come next. The pull of conflicting emotions was strong. Happiness for Noah and Amanda's impending reunification, pride in having helped make it possible, and yes, a sense of impending loss that he couldn't entirely dismiss. Mr. Hunter? Noah's voice called from the bathroom. Can you check if I did a good job brushing? Mark smiled at the request, part of their nightly routine, though Noah was perfectly capable of thorough dental hygiene without supervision. He suspected the boy simply enjoyed the ritual, the predictable sequence of small interactions that reinforced his security. Coming, he called back. Noah had changed into pajamas and was standing at the bathroom sink, toothbrush in hand. He displayed his teeth in an exaggerated grin. Mark pretended to inspect carefully. I think you missed a spot. Right there. He pointed vaguely, sending Noah back to brush again with diligent focus. Better? The boy asked after a minute of intense scrubbing. Perfect, Mark confirmed. Ready for story time? This was another cherished ritual, 15 minutes of reading together before lights out. They were currently working their way through The Hobbit, with Mark doing most of the reading but Noah taking on character voices for Bilbo and the dwarves. Once Noah was settled in bed, book open to their marked page, he looked up at Mark with an expression that suggested he had something important to say. Is it okay if I go live with Mom when her apartment is ready? Even though I really like living here with you too. The question pierced straight to Mark's heart. This child, who had endured so much, worried about hurting his feelings by wanting to be with his mother. Noah, Mark said gently, sitting on the edge of the bed. That is absolutely 100% okay. It's more than okay. It's exactly how things should be. You and your mom belong together. That's what we've all been working toward. But I don't want you to be sad or lonely, Noah persisted. Like you were after Michael died. The observation, so innocent yet so perceptive, momentarily took Mark's breath away. I won't be, he assured Noah, once he'd regained his composure. Because this isn't an ending. It's just a change. You'll still be in my life and I'll be in yours. We've already talked about Saturday baseball. Remember? Noah nodded but still seemed troubled. Promise you won't disappear? Even when I'm living with Mom full-time. I promise, Mark said firmly. In fact, I was thinking maybe I could help other kids too. Kids who need a safe place to stay until they can go home to their families. Like you did. You mean be a foster parent for someone else? Noah asked, his expression brightening. I'm considering it, Mark said. What do you think? I think you'd be really good at it, Noah said decisively. You know all the important stuff, like how to check for monsters under the bed and how to make mac and cheese with the crispy top and how to believe kids even when grown-ups don't want to. Mark smiled at Noah's list of essential foster parent qualifications. Well, With an endorsement like that, how could I not consider it? Noah yawned, snuggling deeper under his covers. We should start reading or I'll fall asleep before the trolls show up. As Mark read the familiar words of Tolkien, he found himself thinking about the journey ahead. Not just Noah's transition back to his mother's care, but his own path forward. 6 months ago, he'd been a solitary man trapped in the orbit of his grief, going through the motions of living without truly engaging with life. Now, through one small but consequential choice, the decision to believe a frightened boy hiding in a school bathroom, he had found his way back to purpose, to connection, to hope. Whatever came next, that transformation would remain. The shadows they had both carried would never completely disappear. Noah's trauma from the Caldwells, Mark's grief for Michael. But they had learned to walk together toward the light, like Ellie's sunflowers turning instinctively toward the sun. 2 months later, on a perfect September afternoon, Mark stood in the community garden behind his apartment building, inspecting the sunflowers that had indeed grown taller than him, their massive yellow faces tracking the sun across the sky. The small balcony pots had proven insufficient for their ambitious growth, prompting a transplant to the larger garden space where they now towered over the other plantings. "They're huge," Noah exclaimed, arriving for his Saturday visit, Amanda a few steps behind him. "I told you they'd win the competition." "You were right," Mark conceded, pretending disappointment. "They've got me beat by at least 6 inches. Noah had been living full-time with Amanda for 3 weeks now, in their cozy Dorchester apartment decorated with thrift store treasures and Noah's artwork. The transition had gone smoother than anyone had dared hope, with Noah dividing his time between the two households for a month before making the complete move. He still spent every Saturday with Mark, sometimes joined by Amanda, sometimes just the two of them. Today's plan included harvesting vegetables from the community garden, then cooking a feast to celebrate Amanda's official completion of her outpatient treatment program. "I brought the recipe," Noah announced, pulling a carefully folded piece of paper from his pocket. "Martha Williams sent it. She says zucchini bread is the best way to use up giant zucchinis that hide under the leaves until they're too big for anything else." The Williamses remained part of their extended circle, occasionally hosting Noah for an afternoon to give Amanda space for her recovery meetings. Their decades of fostering experience had proven invaluable during the transition process, their gentle guidance helping Noah navigate the emotional complexities of reunification. "How many zucchinis do we need?" Mark asked, examining the recipe. 3 cups grated," Noah read carefully. "That's probably just one of the monster ones." As they harvested vegetables, zucchini, tomatoes, a few late peppers, Amanda helped Mark stake up a tomato plant that had begun to droop under the weight of its fruit. "How's the new placement going?" she asked quietly, while Noah was occupied with selecting the perfect zucchini. Mark glanced toward the apartment building, where 10-year-old Aiden had been living with him for the past 3 weeks. Like Noah, Aiden was in the system due to parental substance abuse, though his situation was complicated by his mother's mental health issues. Unlike Noah, he'd already been through 4 foster placements before arriving at Mark's door. "Challenging," Mark admitted, "but we're making progress. He's starting to trust that I mean what I say, that rules stay consistent, that food will always be available." Amanda nodded understanding. "Noah asks about him. I think he likes the idea of helping another kid through what he went through." "Aiden's different," Mark said. "Angrier, more defensive. But underneath, he's just as frightened as Noah was, just as desperately in need of stability." "Good thing he has you, then," Amanda said simply. Their conversation was interrupted by Noah's triumphant return, holding a zucchini nearly the size of his arm. "This one," he declared. "It's perfect for bread." Back in Mark's apartment, they found Aiden sitting at the kitchen table, working on homework with determined concentration. He looked up warily as they entered. "Aiden, you remember Noah and his mom, Amanda," Mark said cheerfully. "They're joining us for dinner tonight." The boy nodded without speaking, his eyes darting between the newcomers before returning to his math worksheet. "We're making zucchini bread," Noah announced, seemingly undeterred by Aiden's reticence. "Want to help? Great? It's the best part." Aiden shook his head, but his eyes lingered on the enormous vegetable Noah was placing on the counter. "That's okay," Noah continued conversationally. "Maybe you can help mix later. Mr. Hunter always lets me lick the spoon when we bake." This detail seemed to capture Aiden's interest, though he tried to hide it. "Really?" "Absolutely," Mark confirmed, beginning to wash the vegetables. "That's the rule in this kitchen. Whoever helps with the mixing gets spoon privileges." A hint of a smile flickered across Aiden's face before he suppressed it. "I guess I could help, after I finish this math." "Great," Mark said, as if the outcome had never been in doubt. "We'll get everything ready." As they prepared the meal together, Amanda and Mark cooking, Noah chattering away, Aiden gradually drawn into the activity, Mark found himself marveling at how much had changed in a single year. Last September, he had been shuttling between his empty apartment and the school's empty hallways, existing rather than living. Now his life overflowed with connections, challenges, purpose. Detective Reyes had called the previous week to share news of a state investigation into foster placement agencies, prompted in part by the Caldwell's case. Ellie Morgan was involved, working with a legislative committee on implementing new oversight protocols. The system that had failed Noah and others like him was slowly, incrementally improving, not fast enough perhaps, but moving in the right direction. "Earth to Mark," Amanda called, breaking into his thoughts. "These tomatoes won't dice themselves." He smiled, returning to the task at hand. "Just thinking about how far we've all come." "Pretty far," she agreed. Her own journey from incarceration to recovery, perhaps the most remarkable transformation of all. Later, as they sat around the table enjoying their homemade feast, Noah regaled them with stories from his new school, where he joined the chess club and made friends with twins who lived in his building. Aiden remained quiet but attentive, occasionally asking a question that revealed he was listening carefully to every word. "Mom and I are going to visit Grandma's grave next weekend," Noah mentioned between bites of zucchini bread. "We're going to plant flowers that come back every year." "Perennials," Mark supplied. "Yeah, those. Mom says they're like memories. They might be sleeping under the snow for a while, but they always come back when it's time." Amanda smiled at her son's recounting. "Something like that. My mom used to plant flowers," Aiden said suddenly, his voice so quiet they almost missed it, "before she got sick. Yellow ones." The three adults exchanged glances, recognizing the significance of this small offering, Aiden's first voluntary sharing of personal information since his arrival. "Maybe you could help us choose some for Grandma's grave," Noah suggested casually. "Since you know about yellow flowers." Aiden considered this. "Maybe." The conversation moved on, but Mark noticed that Aiden seemed marginally more relaxed afterward, as if the simple act of contributing a memory and having it received with interest had released some small measure of his tension. As the evening concluded and Amanda prepared to take Noah home, the boy drew Mark aside for their private goodbye ritual, a handshake that evolved into a complex series of fist bumps and finger wiggles, ending with a quick hug. "Will you bring Aiden to baseball next Saturday?" Noah asked. "I could show him how to use my glove. It's broken in just right." "If he wants to come, yes," Mark said, touched by Noah's generosity. "He will," Noah said with the confidence of someone who had navigated his own path from trauma to trust. "Maybe not at first, but he will." After they'd left, Mark found Aiden in the living room, examining the framed photograph of Michael that Mark had placed on the bookshelf. No longer hidden away in a drawer, but present as a beloved part of his life story. "Was that your son?" Aiden asked cautiously. "Yes," Mark said, joining him by the shelf. "His name was Michael. He died 5 years ago." Aiden nodded, absorbing this information. "Is that why you take care of kids like me and Noah? Because your son died?" The directness of the question was reminiscent of Noah, though delivered with Aiden's more guarded effect. Mark considered how to answer truthfully without burdening the boy with too much emotional complexity. "Partly," he acknowledged. "When you lose someone you love, it changes you. But it's also because every child deserves to feel safe and valued, to have adults who keep their promises. Noah helped me remember that. Now I'm trying to pass it on." Aiden seemed to consider this, his young face serious beyond his years. "My mom might not get better," he said finally. "Not like Noah's mom did." "That's true," Mark agreed, seeing no value in false reassurances. "Every situation is different. But whatever happens with your mom, you won't go through it alone. That I can promise." The boy's gaze returned to the photograph. "My social worker says I might be here a long time." "You might," Mark confirmed. "And that would be okay with me." A small nod was Aiden's only response, but later, as Mark checked on him before bed, he found the boy had placed the small stuffed dog he kept hidden in his backpack on top of his pillow. A tiny but significant sign of beginning to settle in, to trust that this placement might not be temporary like all the others. The next morning, Mark awoke to find Aiden already up, standing on the balcony, watching the sunflowers in the garden below as they turned their faces toward the rising sun. Mark joined him quietly, respecting the moment of contemplation. "Noah says they know where the sun is even when it's hiding," Aiden remarked without looking up. "How do they do that?" "It's built into them," Mark explained. "Something deep in their nature that helps them find the light they need to grow." Aiden considered this. "Do people have that too?" Mark watched the sunflowers. Their bright faces lifted skyward despite the scars of summer storms visible on their broad leaves. "I believe we do," he said finally. "Sometimes we just need a little help remembering how to use it." The boy nodded, seeming satisfied with this answer. Below them, the garden came alive with morning light, illuminating not just the towering sunflowers but the smaller plants growing in their partial shade, shelter and brightness coexisting, each with its place in the delicate balance. Just like the unexpected family they had created. Mark and Noah, Amanda and now Aiden, finding their way forward together, turning steadily toward the light, shadows acknowledged but no longer defining them. Not an ending but a beginning. Not a loss but a transformation. Not just survival but growth.